This is Jocko Podcast number 314 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
The machine rolls on. That's what happens. When your time is up and you leave, the machine is going to roll on. And that can be hard on your brain. It can be hard on your ego. It can also just be hard because you love the teams, you care about the boys, and when you leave, you worry about the void that is there. And you think, oh, who's going to fill that void? And you wonder if you did a good enough job passing on what you learned. And that's rough. That was one of the hardest things for me when I left, when I got out of the Navy. Because my whole adult life had been in the SEAL teams. I was full on institutionalized by the SEAL teams. I didn't know anything else in the world. And I couldn't help but feel that I was leaving them hanging, leaving my friends hanging, that I was letting them down. But the reality is that the machine rolls on. And there are guys that are ready to step up and take your place and take things to the next level and do a better job and carry the torch and take the fight to the enemy and uphold the traditions and uphold the reputation of the teams and elevate it. And so, because this next generation of frogmen step up, the machine rolls on. And I am lucky enough to have one of those frogmen here with me tonight, Carlos Mendez, Los, who I figured out checked into SEAL Team 1 about a decade or so after I did, I think. But who upheld and uplifted the reputation of the teams while he was in. Carlos, thanks for joining us, man.
Pleasure to be here.
What year did you check into Team 1?
2005, January.
2005. Okay, so it was like I checked into Team 1 in 1991.
No fun one. It was still no fun when I got there.
There you go. Well, we'll get there. Let's go back. Let's go back to where you came from, because damn, I mean, it's a weird ride, right? You got an interesting background story. So you're not born in America.
No, I was born in Guatemala. So, I'll even start before that. So my father passed away when my mom was pregnant with me.
Oh, dang.
So, yeah, actually she got the news on the day of her baby shower.
What did he die from?
A car accident. Yeah. So I was born in Guatemala to a single mom, obviously. And, my grandparents, my dad was their favorite son. So when my mom had me, I was the favorite grandchild. And they wanted a lot of control over the way she raised me. And it was this conflict back and forth. And, when I talked to my mom, she said ultimately that's what drove her to the decision to immigrate to the U.S. She's like, I need to get you away from here, because I was spoiled rotten. From what I hear, I was an absolute terror, and I can get away with it because Grandma was there to protect me. And, she used to babysit me. My mom would drop me off in the mornings. And it was funny because the things that you remember are just so weird. I remember we would go get gas, and in Guatemala, people don't have a lot of money. So if you filled up a full gas tank, you got a baby chick.
Okay.
Yeah. So my mom, filled the gas tank up, and we would get a baby chick. So I remember I would drive back to my grandma's house, and I would have that baby chick, and we had all kinds of them, from all the times we filled up the gas tank. So it was me chasing a bunch of chickens and chicks in the backyard.
It's interesting that your mom, she's got to be a pretty interesting human, because you would figure here she is, single mom, and she actually has this kid, that is getting swooned over by the grandparents, it seems like a single mom would be like, thank God these grandparents are here to help me through this. And I'm kind of set now, right?
Yeah.
I got like backup as opposed to no backup, which, you know, your dad was dead. I mean, but she just thought, oh, he's being spoiled. We're out of here.
Oh yeah, my mom's a gangster. She is very old school Hispanic, just very, you know, disciplined. Screw your feelings kind of thing. It's always your fault kind of thing. Like I remember anytime I got in trouble, she's like, what'd you do? It was your fault. And I'm like, everybody else's parents stand up for them, not my mom. My mom's like, what'd you do? I know it was your fault. Some way or another, it was your fault. So that's why I always kind of joke around with JP that I had extreme ownership.
At birth.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, that's what drove her decision to leave Guatemala and come to the U.S.
So how old were you when you came to the U.S.? Do you remember? I guess you must remember because you remember the
4 or 5.
chicks.
Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, things here and there that you remember. I was like 4 or 5, but I do remember I was in school, and I remember showing up to school and not being able to speak English. And my mom set me up for total success. And I say that sarcastically because she would dress me up in like a collared shirt. Or everything had to be like a collar. Because, you know, in Guatemala, you dress nice to go to school. You have a uniform. And now we were in San Francisco, not a nice area either, you know. And so I'm wearing this, you know, button-up shirt with some Docker type pants that we got at the Goodwill. Shirt had to be tucked in, and like these alligator skin shoes, because in Guatemala they're cheap, you know, like alligator skin shoes. So that was like the thing. And she's like, you know, in Guatemala these are like a luxury. And I'm like, well, over here it's getting my ass kicked, wearing these alligator shoes and Dockers and tucked in shirts. So yeah. Needless to say, I ran into a lot of issues when I first showed up. Didn't speak English. I'm dressing like a complete dork. And you know, the kids that I'm with are a little rough around the edges.
What'd your mom do for work when she got here?
So I remember she worked at the school that I was at so she can keep an eye on me as a teacher's assistant. And then after school, I remember she worked as she would clean houses. Mm-hmm. And I remember going after school, we would go to, you know, whoever's house, and she would clean it, and I would do my homework while she cleaned. And if I didn't have homework, like I would help her out. And then I think like twice a week or so, she would go to English school to learn how to speak English, mm-hmm. and I'll go with her there. And
you're getting immersion training at school because you're just showing up and they're speaking all English.
Oh yeah. And it's kind of funny because so my mom's side of the family was already in San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area. Oh, okay. So that's why we moved there.
Got it.
She had her side of the family there. My dad's side of the family was the one that stayed in Guatemala because they're actually pretty well off there. So she had that support system, and I thought it was interesting how my family was like, oh, the kids need to learn how to speak English so the kids won't make fun of them. And my mom was just like, I don't care about his feelings. Like, okay, they make fun of him, so what? He's not allowed to speak English at home because he's going to forget Spanish. He's going to learn English regardless. But I want him to remember how to speak Spanish. So at home, I wasn't allowed to speak any English.
Your mom is a gangster, huh?
Oh, dude, she's heartless.
And then, so then she ended up meeting someone else or getting married to someone else, right? Like stepdad showed up, basically.
Yep. So she actually met my stepdad in San Francisco in English school. So he was from Czechoslovakia when it was still Czechoslovakia.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, and his story is pretty amazing. You know, when he was in high school, so he was there when it was still under communist rule. Mm-hmm. So when he tells a story, you know, he was in high school and he drew a cartoon criticizing communism. And I guess like a week later, some men showed up. They dragged him out of school. They beat him up. And then they told him, hey, when you graduate, we're going to send you to the mines and you're going to die there. You're going to work there for the rest of your life till you die. So he was just like, nope, not happening. He started planning his escape and didn't tell anybody, not a soul. Packed his stuff in like this green bag that he actually still had when I met him. Packed everything he had in there and ran away. And he just recently told me this story too, like maybe 2-3 months ago. Like the actual details of how he crawled for days across the border and somehow made it into Yugoslavia. And yeah, it's a pretty crazy story.
Yeah, the when you're in those communist countries, the amount of government like it's some crazy number. Like 50% of people are government informants. It's a crazy number. It's a crazy number. So your stepdad couldn't have told anybody, because if you tell one person, you might as well just tell everybody, and you're going to get ratted out. And he's already got the threats of being in the mines for the rest of his life and dying there. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Freaking savages. So they end up getting married? I mean, is that the next phase?
Yeah, they started dating, and in my head I'm thinking like, oh sweet, I'm finally gonna have a dad. You know, little did I know he was meaner than my mom. You know, I mean, he's a hard man. I mean, he's, you know, communist bloc. They grew up very, very hard up there. Life is hard, so he was hard on me.
So what were you doing growing up? What was a day in the life of Carlos? Let's say age 11.
Oh, age 11. Mm-hmm. Oh, by that time we had, I'm not sure, I don't remember if we had already moved out to Sacramento. At one point, you know, they were like, hey, you know, the Bay Area is just too expensive. It's not a great place to raise a family. And we moved out to Sacramento, and I remember we started renting this house out that had this huge yard. Well, for me, it was huge because I hadn't seen a backyard, you know, in San Francisco or Oakland. And he just gave me a ton of chores. Like, that's what my life. So my life was, I come home from school, I do chores, I do homework, and then after we eat dinner, you know, I wash all the dishes, I take everything off the counter, wipe them all down, sweep, mop. Like, that was something that I did every single day. And then in the backyard, I always had all kinds of chores that he had for me. And I think a lot of it too had to do with he worked a ton. Like, he is probably the hardest working man I've ever met in my life. Like, yeah, he was mean, and probably growing up, I wasn't, you know, I hated him growing up. But now that I'm all grown up and I look back, like, man, that guy worked his ass off. Like, he did anything and everything he could do. Like, I remember he used to sell like vacuums for Electrolux. He used to deliver pizzas for Domino's Pizza. He finally got into like ITT Tech to become a drafter. So he became a drafter eventually, designing like elevators or something like that. And then I remember he would do that all day. He would come home, he would take a nap, and then he would go back and deliver pizzas all night long. Get maybe like 2-3 hours of sleep and do it all over again. So, you know, looking back now, I'm like, okay, that's why I had to do so much stuff around the house, because he just wasn't around. He was providing for the family. So.
And when you get to, like, what kind of kids are you hanging out with? You playing any sports or anything?
No. My mom, and like I said, my mom and dad were both really strict on me, and the only two things that I was really allowed to do growing up, I remember, were Legos and reading. So I would devour any book I can get my hands on, because we weren't allowed to watch like TV. Actually, I don't think we owned a TV for a big portion. And then finally when we did, we weren't allowed to watch a whole lot of it. They had a subscription to Reader's Digest. So I would read Reader's Digest cover to cover. Okay. As soon as it came in, I was actually the one that would rip the wrapper open, and I would just start reading. And it's funny because it was actually the first time that I was exposed to the teams. Even though I didn't know it, there was an article in Reader's Digest when I was a kid, and it was something like the hardest school. You know, I don't remember exactly what the title, but it talked about this gentleman who was in the Army, saw some team guys, and went to Buds, and he talked about his experience going through Buds. But at the time, I didn't know what it was. I was just like, oh, cool story. But yeah, Legos, reading. I wasn't allowed to really play with other kids because my life was like chores and homework, and my parents were both perfectionists. So, you know, I would turn in my homework, and if the handwriting was sloppy, they'd like, do it over. Or like the dishes. Like if I do the dishes and like one of them was wrong, my step, I'd be like, do them all over. I'm like, dang it. So that's kind of how I remember my childhood. It was a lot of chores, homework, and then kind of just reading a lot and playing with Legos a lot.
Yes, sir. Right. Did you end up, I think you've mentioned to me you had some kind of like little farm or something at some point?
Yeah.
Or like at least some little animals running around the house?
Yeah. So at one point, you know, we got accepted for this program that was like for low income families, where they allowed you to build your house, and it would offset some of the costs, but it would allow, you know, it was like a path to ownership.
Yeah, that's legit.
And so my parents both applied for it. We got accepted. So for a long time, that was actually a big part of my childhood too. For a long time, I remember like going to school and then going to help at the construction site. My weekends, same thing. They were spent at the construction site helping build our house. And when it was completed, you know, my stepdad had all kinds of stuff in the backyard. Like we had this little farm. So he built, like, when I say he built, I mean mostly I built. Because my weekends were like, I remember my weekends like, oh, I'm going to get to sleep in. And I would just hear a bang on my window like at 5:30 in the morning. And it's him like, hey, get up. It's time to work. I'm like, dang. You know, so I go out there and we built a greenhouse. We had all kinds of fruits and vegetables. We had a compost pile. So I remember digging that hole. He wanted it so big, and I spent forever. I did all our irrigation, so I dug all the holes for that. And then he got this idea so we had all our fruits and vegetables, but he's like, now we need our meat. So he's like, we're going to, you know, in Czech, we used to eat rabbits. So I remember going to the state farm, like looking at all these different rabbits, and then he's like, oh, these are the kind that you can eat. So we bought like a male rabbit and like 2 or 3 females, and we started breeding rabbits. Little did I know that was going to be that. So that's another chore now that I had, like taking care of these rabbits, feeding them, you know, cleaning up their poop. And then when I got the poop, I put it in the compost pile, and everything, like all the clippings from the grass and everything we grew, we'd throw in the compost pile. Now I'd have to get in there and like mix it up, and it was miserable. But then the baby rabbits got to age, and he's like, hey, your chore from now on, another chore, is going to be like, hey, you're going to kill the rabbits, you're going to skin them, and you're going to put them in the freezer. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to kill a rabbit. He's like, you're going to learn today. And he's like, well, let me know. He's like, let me know when you kill that first rabbit. Let me know, and I'll show you how to skin it. So I remember being a kid, because I'm looking at, I'm like, oh,
how old are you at this point?
I'm going to say junior high.
Okay. So what's that, like
12
or 13, something like this? All right.
I'm more around 11 or 12,
okay.
I think. Because I remember being young. Because I remember, so the first one, I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to drown the rabbit. Right, so I grab a bucket, I fill it up with water, and I grab this rabbit and I put it in the bucket, and it freaking won't die. And then now I'm crying. I remember crying because I'm like, oh my God, please die, just die, damn it. And I'm just holding it, and just like finally, you know, the rabbit dies, and I'm just like, oh my God, that was the most miserable experience ever. I'm crying. I'm a kid, and so finally I go back in. I'm like, okay, I killed the rabbit, you know. And he's like, stop crying, Fifina. That was his nickname for me.
Which Fifina is freaking Czechoslovakian for what?
It's Czechoslovakian for pussy. So you know, he shows me how to skin the rabbit, and I'm like, okay. And I'm not really paying attention because I'm still traumatized.
You're traumatized, bro.
And then he's
freaking
like,
raised these rabbits.
So
and you drowned it.
So now he's like, okay, it's time to kill the second one. And now I'm like, I'm gonna do it a different way. So I'm like, I grab a 2x4. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna hit this rabbit on the head. So I grab the rabbit. I'm like petting it, you know, and then I hit it, but I kind of half-ass hit it. So now he's just like twirling in my hands, and now again I got snot running down my nose, tears, and I'm just like hitting this rabbit again, like, please, damn it, just die. And finally, after whacking it like a million times, it died. Same thing, comes out, teaches me how to skin it. And then on the third rabbit, something happened. You know,
wait, something already happened twice.
But something happened that actually stuck with me for till today.
Okay.
Actually,
all right.
So I remember I got this rabbit and I'm petting it, and now I'm talking to myself, and I'm like, all right, motherfucker.
By the way, this is how serial killers get created. Just FYI, full on. You start talking to yourself.
So when I told my wife the story, she's like, I get it.
Jack.
But I'm looking at this rabbit, and I'm like, you know, talking myself up. I'm like pumping myself up. I'm like, you know what? I got to commit, like 100% commit. So I remember I grabbed that rabbit, I grabbed that 2x4, and I hit it as hard as I could, and it was out. And from that point on, it's crazy, because even in the teams when I did something that I was a little bit scared of, or even in, you know, anything, I'm like, commit. That thought has always come in my head, like, if you're scared of doing something, you got to 100% commit, or it's not going to work. And in that moment, I had that epiphany as an 11, 12-year-old kid. So, yeah, that's my rabbit story.
Damn.
So, you know, a lot of times people ask me questions about, because I got kids and parenting and all that stuff. And one thing I warn parents of, you know, if you push hard against your kids, they're going to push back. And by the way, this isn't just with kids. This is with a SEAL platoon. This is with a company. This is with a business. You start imposing stuff on people they're going to start to push back because they're humans, and humans don't like to have things imposed on them. And you can, by the way, you can impose things on people permanently, but you have to like crush them, and you have to continuously crush them forever, and you have to be willing to go to that distance where you crush them, which is not going to produce the type of humans that you want. So was there any pushback? Or let me rephrase that. At what age did you start to say, I'm pushing back against this stuff?
I'm going to say around my sophomore year. I'm 15, and like I said, my stepdad ruled with an iron fist. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? I'm not scared of you anymore. Because his punishments were so extreme. Like, his punishments were like, oh, you're grounded for the weekend. It was like, you're grounded for the next 2 months. And if I messed up, it was like another month. And it was like, dude, there's like no light at the end of this tunnel.
2 months when you're a kid might as well be life imprisonment.
Yeah. So, and they didn't let me play sports. So I wasn't hanging around the jocks. So guess who I hung out with? I hung out with thugs. Mm-hmm. Hung out with people that, weren't the best influence on me. And I got into some trouble. And I got locked away in juvenile hall, and
so how old are you?
15, 16 years old. Mm-hmm. And I remember when that happened, because my stepdad at this point, he had actually just graduated the CHP Academy. So now he's law enforcement.
Damn.
Yeah, he's law enforcement, and I'm running around,
little mini gangbanger.
Yeah, breaking the law. And at one point I got caught. I got arrested, and I remember the cop bringing me in and interviewing me, and I'm just like, I don't want to talk. Because, I got that stupid mentality. I'm no snitch. No, I'm a gangster. So I don't snitch. I don't say anything. And he's like, hey, it's not going to go. Little did I know, everybody else was singing like a bird. So it's crazy, because I remember going to court. So they put me away. They called my parents, and my parents were like, leave them there. Like, you don't want to come get your kid? Like, nope, leave them there. And I knew. And I even told the cop, I'm like, don't bother calling my parents. They're going to leave me here. He's like, oh, you were right. So anyways, I'm in court, and the judge is like, hey, do you want an attorney? And I was like, no, I don't. And he's like, are you sure? Do you know what you're doing? I'm like, yep, I don't need an attorney. I was like,
15 years old, I'm going to represent myself in the court of law.
Well, I was like, hey, I'm guilty. I did it.
Okay, Chuck.
And then he's like, so you plead? I was like, I plead guilty. Like, I'm not even going to fight it. And he's like, check. And he gave me my sentence, and I remember seeing my parents, and no expression on their face, but I could tell, like, my mom was disappointed in me.
Yeah.
As they took me away in cuffs, and had to do my time in juvenile hall.
How long were you in juvie for?
I think a couple months, and that's because they were full. And honestly, I was a good, respectful. I want to say good. But I was a respectful kid because of the way I was raised. Mm-hmm. So when I was in juvie, like, the correctional officers were like, you're like the politest criminal I've ever met.
Did you start to see the path that you were going down at that point, and realize, like, maybe this is the way it's going to end up?
Yeah. So, having different roommates in juvenile hall kind of opened my eyes. I'm like, man, I don't belong here. Like, some of the kids that were in there, like, one of my roommates was in there because, he tried to murder this girl with his friends, and they were so high off drugs that when they tried to dig the hole to bury the body, they were so high that they buried the hole, like, not even a foot deep, and they put her in there and just put some dirt, and didn't realize she was still alive. Those are the kind of roommates that I had. I think at one point they put me in with, like, a kid who was in there for a hate crime, like a skinhead. Mm-hmm. Was in there for a hate crime. And, just being there, I'm like, dang, I don't belong here. And I felt terrible that my parents, because I knew my parents had raised me the right way. And I'm like, man, I really let them down here. So that's when I knew. I was like, this is not what I want to do.
So was that a good... A lot of times people think that, but then, as soon as they get out and they get back around their friends, was that a good enough, like, scared straight situation that you actually were scared straight?
I wouldn't say scared straight, because now I'm like, okay, I did it. It was fine. In my head, I'm like, I'm hard, like, I go back into juvie. Now I'm on probation, and any little thing is like an automatic 10 days you go back. So when I got out, same thing. It was actually even worse now. And it got to the point where I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do whatever I want, whenever I want. Whatever I want, whenever I want. And I would wait for my parents to go to bed, and I would just sneak out of the house.
So you kind of got emboldened.
Oh, big
because you
time.
went in there, because it wasn't really a scared straight thing. It was more like you got emboldened because now
Yeah.
you think, hey, dude, I could. Juvie wasn't that bad.
Yep,
you
exactly.
know, no factor. I'll get out. And,
Yep.
and so you actually got worse.
So I stopped committing crimes, but I was going out. I just wanted to hang out with my friends, honestly, because it was just so strict. And where I made my mistake is this is around the time where cell phones started coming out. So I would, you know, my parents went to bed early too, and they would put me to bed like at 8 o'clock. I'm a teenager, put me to bed at 8 o'clock. But at the time, I'm like,
Tucking
cool.
you in,
yeah,
bro.
put me to bed early, you know, because the earlier you put me in, the earlier I'm leaving. Yeah. So I would wait for them to go to bed. I would go to the living room. I would grab my dad's cell phone, and then I would roll out. And now I'm the only kid like rolling around like with a cell phone. I'm like, yeah, let's call so and so. Let's call so and so. Like, you know. Until the cell phone bill came out. I didn't know that because I didn't know how cell phones worked.
Yeah, because back then, this is in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
So
you
yeah,
get
so
charged
you get charged
per call.
per minute per call.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it wasn't cheap either.
No, it was
like
not.
it was like $1 a minute.
Yeah.
or something crazy like that.
Yeah. So my dad blew a casket when he saw that bill, and long story short, it was just this constant back and forth between him and I. And it got to the point where I told him, I'm like, hey, I'm not scared of you. I'm going to do whatever I want whenever I want. Like, what are you going to do? Beat me? You know, ground me? I'm already grounded for life. And so at this time, I'm still getting in trouble for smaller things. And my probation officer was like, hey, listen, you're like at the point where we're just going to put you away till you're 18. I was just like, oh, dang. And I had a teacher at the time that I had built a great relationship with. He was like it was like a life skills class where I teach you how to like write checks, pay your bills, stuff, you know, stuff like that. And him and I had built a good relationship, and I don't know how he got wind of it, but he knew the judge or whatever, and he was like, hey, you know, he's a good kid. He's got a situation at home where he doesn't get along with his stepdad, and the judge is like, well, if you think he's such a good kid, then you adopt him. And he said, okay. And he adopted me. And at that point, like, I think my stepdad was like at the end of his, you know, his way. He's just like, I can't handle this kid. He's like, go. And he signed away. And
So were you 16, 17 at this
about
point?
17. Yeah, 17.
So you're going to
That's
basically
my senior year.
Your senior year of high school, you're going to
Go live with my teacher.
live with your teacher.
Yeah. So I lived with him, and it was
What was the deal with this teacher?
Dude,
is this like
I
the
don't-
coolest teacher ever?
I don't know. So he was very religious. Like
Okay.
him and his wife were very religious. They had 5 kids. They had raised them all to be very like successful people. Like they were just good people.
Mm-hmm.
But in my head, I'm like, what is this guy thinking? Because I wouldn't let some little thug move in with me. But honestly, when I moved in with him, I was so grateful that I told him, I'm like, hey, this is your house, your rules, and I'll follow them. And I didn't give him like a peep of trouble because I was so grateful for what he had done, and he treated me like an adult for the first time. You know, he was just like, hey, if you're gonna go out, just let me know who you're with, what time you'll be back. And for me, that was like, what? You're gonna let me go out with my friend? Like, it was something that I wasn't allowed to do before. So I was so grateful for that. I'm like, dude, this is a great thing. I don't want to mess it up. And you didn't hear a peep from me for the rest of the year. Like, I was on my best behavior with him.
Are you getting good grades in school?
Yeah. So actually, that's the funny thing is I actually did really well in school.
Even this whole time?
Mm-hmm. And it was funny because I had my probation officer required like a progress report. Mm-hmm. I think so. That's how he got a wind of it, because the teachers would look at me and be like, "Dude, you're a good kid. You get good grades. What are you filling this out for?" And I'm like, "My probation officer." And they would look at me like, "What?"
Man.
Yeah. And so there were a couple teachers actually during that time that had a big influence on me. And one of them's name is Bobby Pryor. He's prior Navy vet, and he talked about Navy SEALs too. And he had a big influence on me as well. And I remember him like telling stories about, you know, when he was in the Navy. And he told me this story that stuck with me for a long time about these 2 SEALs. They were on the beach and they got in a fight with some biker dudes. And they just got back to back and got after it. And he's like, these bikers were laid out. And he just talked about how badass Navy SEALs were. But I still didn't make that connection. You know what I mean?
The connection being that this is something you could actually do with your life.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, that's cool. You know? So between him and the other teacher that I lived with, they were a big influence on me in a different way. Like my stepdad taught me a lot of things that I'm super grateful, how to be tough, how to be, you know, work ethic. But they had like a softer, more empathetic mentoring. I think that's a better word. They were more mentoring me.
Yeah, I know the well, here's your dad saying, hey, you can't go out with your friends, or sorry, your stepdad saying you can't go out with your friends, etc. Your mom's super strict, and it makes you want to not do what they're telling you to do.
Oh, 100%.
When they impose things on you, it makes you not want to do it. This other dude says, hey, you do what you want. Just let me know what you're doing, and you all of a sudden want to follow the rules.
Yeah.
It's like such simple psychology on human beings. When you impose things on people, they don't like it. When you give them freedom, they're gonna take advantage of it in a positive way. Here's something interesting. Like, I have grown kids now. I have one that's not grown, but my other kids are, how old? 22, 20, and 18. They didn't have curfews. I'd just be like, oh, yep, cool. Oh, go out. This is when they were 13 years old, 15 years old. I'd say, okay, let me know where you're going. Sometimes, hey, when are you going to be back? Are you coming back tonight? And I just let them do what they want to do. And they all turned out, they all are fine, know, which, well, I mean, you don't want to say, like,
you're like stuttering. Then they all, well, they're fine.
I mean, they're all good kids. I mean, they all actually are.
Fully,
they're all
yeah.
good kids. They all are on really good paths in life. And I never. Now, if you were to there was some incidents that took place along the way. Some things that need some corrective measures need to be imposed from time to time if things got a little bit too far out of line, and that happened a few times. But then it was like, oh, they'd get back in line and realize, and then I would just give them their freedom back. But you know what? One of the key things is that you said is, and I tell this to people all the time, treat them like adults, especially when they're in that age. This is a trick too. There's a little trick to this. There's an age where, oh, you're 14 years old. Oh, you think you want to be an adult? Okay, cool. Guess what adults have? Jobs. Guess what adults do? Pay bills. They pay rent.
Yeah.
They pay for their cell phone. They pay for their food. So you want to be treated like an adult? You want to do whatever you want? Cool. I can treat you like an adult. You owe rent, or you need to pay for food and all that stuff. And they realize really quick that's a real good appreciation tool. You want to make somebody appreciate what they've got? Treat them like an adult.
Yeah.
And they're thinking they want to get treated like an adult. And then when they start getting treated like an adult, they go, hey, I'm cool with being a kid for a little bit longer.
Yes, sir.
So what'd you do when you graduated from high school then? Was it straight to the Navy?
No. I actually had no intentions of joining the military. So after high school, I started working construction full time. And then on the weekends, I worked at Long's Drugs on Saturdays and Sundays. And this was the summer after I graduated. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And then, those two teachers I told you about, they're like, oh, so, you got to start college. I was like, no one had ever talked to me about college. And I was like, I wasn't excited about it. So they signed me up for college. They helped me out. And I started going to community college. And I didn't like it. I was there and I'm just like, I feel like this is high school all over again. Because, you're taking the prereqs. So you're taking the same stuff. So in my head, I'm like, I'm not learning anything right now that's going to help me in life. So I dropped out very quickly. I think I was there for like 2 minutes. And I went back to working construction because I was making, for an 18 or 17. Actually, I was still 17 because I graduated when I was 17. I was making good money for, 17, 18-year-old.
Sure.
And I would work 7 days a week because I loved the fact that the more I worked, the more money I would make. So I'm like, dude, you mean I can work 7 days a week? So I did it. And it was around that time at Long's Drugs, they used to have VHS, they still have VHS. Yeah. And then we rented out movies. And so every Friday night, I would go and pick a movie out for myself, and that would be my Friday night. And one day I picked up the movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen. And I went home and I watched it, and I was just like, whoa, this is badass. And then that's when these are the guys that Mr. Pryor talked to me about. And that's where I made that connection. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm going to go be a Navy SEAL. And I didn't even know how to swim that well.
Damn.
Yeah. I went into the recruiter's office, I think the next day. And, I told him, I was like, hey, I'm here to sign up for the Navy. I want to be a Navy SEAL. And of course they all laughed.
God, he was stoked. That recruiter goes,
oh, yeah. I was a recruiter's dream.
Well, that's outstanding, son. You look like you'd make a great Navy SEAL.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. This guy totally set me up for failure. Like, yeah. So I went through the process very quickly because I'm like, hey, I'm committed. Let's do it. And so I take the ASVAB, whatever, and then he gives me the corpsman rating. He's like, what do you think about being a corpsman? And I was like, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's like a medic. When you get out, you're like a registered nurse and you can have a job. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So when I get out, I'll have a skill. So I'll be the medic on the team. So I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So
were you in the did you get some kind of a SEAL contract? Like, how did
they didn't have that back then. But here's the thing. I didn't know anything.
Right.
So this recruiter totally screwed me over. One, I wasn't a citizen. So you can't be in the teams without being, but you know, this part of it will come into play.
Yeah.
So, you know, I go off to boot camp. He ships me off under a corpsman contract. So I go to boot camp. Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, you joined the Navy as a regular Navy dude, as a corpsman, and that gives you no leverage whatsoever to try and get to buds. I mean, very little leverage.
What year is this, you figure?
1999. And by the way, I barely got into the Navy because I had felonies on my record. So I had to get like multiple waivers. And back then, you know, being in the military wasn't cool. So they were like, all right. You know, because I tell my son now, I'm like, listen, he knows I got in trouble as a kid. I'm like, listen, you can't do that nowadays.
No.
I mean, you got to have secret clearances. You got to do this. I mean, you do.
Yeah. It's totally, they're way more selective now.
Oh, yeah.
In every branch. And for SEALs, for sure. It's because there's so many kids that want to go into it. Yeah. They can pick and choose.
Exactly. Yeah. So I go to boot camp and they have the video, you know, with all the cool stuff. And then I'm like, this is it. And they're like, who wants to try out? And I raise my hand. I'm like, heck yeah, this is it. But the problem is I didn't know how to swim very well. So we take the screener. Dude. We take the screen. And look, I can get from one end of the pool to the other. But I am not what you would call a good swimmer. Like I never took, you know, swimming classes. I could do this.
Right.
Like kind of doggy my way over. And I wasn't scared of the water. I just wasn't good. And I failed it the first time around. I was like, dang, dude, what am I going to do? You know, now I'm really stressing because now I'm like, dang, I'm going to go to the regular Navy. And I was really, really scared of the regular Navy. I was like, I don't want to get stuck on a ship. And so they're like, my RDC really, really liked me. You know, I was her yeoman. So I had a lot of freedom. You know, the yeoman like takes all the paperwork. So you have actually a lot of freedom in boot camp to walk around because I would deliver all the stuff.
Where'd you go to boot camp?
Great Lakes.
Check.
Yeah, so she was like, hey, I'll let you try out one more time. I was like, oh, no. So I go. And by the way, everyone and their mother's trying out. So there's like 50 people in the pool. So I'm swimming and I'm listening to the times. And I'm like, oh, my God, I'm not going to make it again. So I just stood up at one point. I was like, I'm done. And they're like, okay, get out and get ready for push-ups and pull-ups. I was like, oh, shit, that worked. So I got out.
So you just cut a lap off your time.
Oh, I'm going to say I cut like
a lap or two.
I'm going to say it was like at least 2. I was nowhere near finishing. But there's so many kids in the pool.
Did you do any work? Did you had you worked out at all?
So I was very athletic. Yeah, growing up.
But you didn't play sports.
So I played sports in high school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We didn't cover that.
Oh, yeah.
What
The
sports you play
coaches.
in high school?
So I played, you know, in PE, I would play football, basketball, anything. And I would catch on to it very quickly. Like, coaches were always hitting my mom up. Like,
Did you play any sports for the school?
No, I wasn't allowed to.
So it was just PE.
Yeah. And that's why the coaches, because the coaches are usually the PE teachers. So they call my mom and they're like, hey, like your son really needs to play football. Really needs to do that. Because I was really athletic, I was fast, and I was functionally strong because I did so many chores that I was a pretty strong kid, you know, for my age. So I was athletic. I could do push-ups all day, pull-ups all day. You know, I could run. I just couldn't swim. So when I got out, you know, I crushed the pull-ups and push-ups and everything else. And so I'm going through the process, and then the dive motivator's like, hey, just so you know, corpsmen are not, it's not a SEAL rating. It was the only year that they did it where for whatever reason, they were like, if you want to be a corpsman with the teams, you got to go to the Marines first. So I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. So I went to the office and I changed my rating to like a boatswain's mate.
Damn.
And then I go back and I'm like, hey, you know, I'm a SEAL rating now. And he's like, cool, now we can get you in. And then as he's doing my paperwork, he's like, you're not a citizen. You can't go. I'm like, dang it. So I go back. I change it back to a corpsman because I know what a boatswain's mate is. Yeah. So I go back. I change it back to a corpsman. And, you know, they're like, hey, sorry, man, we really liked you, but you got to get your citizenship first. So from there, I went to Corps school.
And then from Corps school, where you ended up with the Marines, right?
Yeah. Yep. So about the majority of the corpsmen, especially if you're male, you're going to go to the Marines. So they sent me to a school called FMSS where they basically teach you how to be a Marine. You know, they teach you like Marine Corps like ranks, etiquette, whatever. And then at one point they ask you if you want to go Marine Corps regs, which is basically you got to cut your hair like them, and if you do, you get like to wear their green uniform. I forget what they're called. And like everybody was like super moto, and they're like, yeah, I want to be Marine Corps regs. And then they're like, what about you, Mendez? Do you want to be Marine Corps regs? And I was like, no. And like, but you get a uniform. You get to wear the Marine Corps uniform. I'm like, I got enough uniforms, because before you had to always carry them around in your sea bag, and you had inspections all the time. I'm like, I don't want another uniform. And it was right around that time where I met the recon corpsman that was there. I mean, you just looked at him. He just looked like a stud. So I immediately gravitated towards him. And then he's like, hey, just so you know, we're going to have tryouts if you want to be a recon corpsman. At the time, they were like 40% manned. They're like, we're really hurting. We could really use people. So I go and I try out, and I fail to swim again. But, you know, he's like, hey, man, get out, do the rest of it. And that screener was actually legit. Like, it was tough. Like, it was a ruck run. It was like pull-ups, push-ups. It was like the Marine Corps PFT, and then it was like all these different calisthenics with no number. You just did it for time, and they had a number that they wouldn't tell you. So like, hey, you got to do this amount of mountain climbers, and they wouldn't tell you what it is. It was like a day-long screener. And I passed everything else. Like, I crushed everything else. And he was like, hey, I'll tell you what. He's like, you have until the end of FMSS to pass the swim. He's like, you're obviously, you know, athletic. You have the physical abilities to do, you just can't swim. So I'm like, okay, perfect. And at one point, I remember going in his office and doing like the dive physical and getting my chest x-ray and whatnot. And somehow through conversation, I was like, yeah, I want to go to BUD/S. He's like, you want to do what? He's like, I was like, I want to go to BUD/S eventually. Like, I'm just kind of doing this, you know, my time with the Marines until I could get to BUD/S. And he grabs my paperwork. He like crumbles it up. He's like, you will never be a recon corpsman. And he chucked my stuff in the garbage. Damn, bro. He's like, get out of my office. Like,
that was it.
And I was like, oh, snap. Yeah. So then I got orders to 2-4, which is a grunt battalion there in Camp Pendleton. And as soon as I get there, I'm like really regretting it. I'm like, dang, what did I do? You know, maybe I should have just kept my mouth shut and just gone with it. And as soon as I get there,
that's usually good advice.
Yeah,
many cases in life.
Yeah, right. And so as soon as I get to 2-4, they're already like, hey, we're getting ready to deploy. So I didn't do a workup or anything. I think I was home for maybe a month, and then we deployed to Japan, my first deployment.
And what are you doing? What did you do on deployment? Would you do exercises and stuff?
So I was like the coverage corpsman, and you know, my chief knew that I wanted to go to BUD/S, so he would attach me to like the amphibious assault platoon or whatever, like where they did all the boat stuff and OTB stuff. So I did that. Was like their corpsman. Basically, if anybody got hurt, I was the corpsman coverage for that. But during that deployment, that's where I like got really serious about learning how to swim. And I was in the pool every chance I could get. Like if I had the time, I would go in the mornings, I would go at lunch, and that's why. Oh, because there was a guy that I met that had dropped out of BUD/S. And I told him, I was like, do you know how to do the combat side stroke? And he's like, yeah. I was like, teach me. So he taught me, and that's where I got proficient at swimming, was during that deployment.
This is still pre-9/11.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just all kind of
training.
Yeah, just going on training missions and big exercises. And so that's a normal 6-month deployment you go on with the Marines?
Yeah, pretty uneventful.
Get done with that, and what happens when you come home from that?
So I come home, and then we get a new chief, and we start talking, and then he's like, hey, have you ever thought about going recon? I was like, yeah, I've thought about it, you know, but I want to go to BUD/S or whatever. He's like, hey, why don't you have the conversation with this recon chief? And so the recon chief and I start talking, and then he's like, hey, we have a guy here who's not really working out, and we want to see if you want to come over here. And I told him, I'm like, hey, I want to be honest with you, like, my goal is to go to BUD/S. He's like, hey, listen, no problem. He's like, why don't you come over here, see if you like it. If you like it, stay. If not, I'll send you to BUD/S. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he's like, if you come over here, I'll give you BAH, which as an
damn.
What's BAH?
Basic allowance for housing.
Yeah.
But it's legit. It's legit money. No, it could be like $1,200 a month.
Yeah.
And when what were you?
E4.
Yo, you're an E4. You're sort of like maybe almost doubling your paycheck. Not quite. Maybe like 50% of your pay. Yeah. You're gonna make extra. It's a big deal getting that BAH. That's why dudes get married, by the way. Dudes, that's why you see 18-year-old Marines are like, "Yep, I'm getting married." Why are you getting married? You met the woman of your dreams? No, but I'm going to get BAH, son.
Yeah.
They want that BAH.
I understand.
Yeah, so it's a big deal, especially in the Marines, because in the Marines, the barracks had to be like 95% man, and you had to be like an E5 or above. And so I'm an E4, and he's like, BAH, and some magic words. I'm like, let's do it. So I headed over there, and I see the guy that I'm supposed to replace, and the guy looks like Superman. I mean, he's super tall, just jacked. And I'm like, I'm replacing this guy? And then, I kind of, like, I could tell that the LPO there kind of saw. I was like, oh, dang, I see this guy. And then he's like, he looks like Superman, right? And I was like, yeah, he does. He's like, you know what's his kryptonite? Water.
Ooh.
And I guess he would freak out during the water evolution, because they had him like tread water with, like, they do a lot of stuff over there with water, and I guess he would just like freak out. So I'm like, okay, cool. So that's how I ended up there. They put me right into my first introduction to them was an SR. So they were like, hey, you're going to do an OTB SR.
At Pendleton?
Yeah, Pendleton.
Yeah.
I had just been there. I'd just gotten there. And there was a corpsman there at the recon battalion who had orders to go to Buds. So they were like, hey, can you take Carlos under your wing, kind of show him how to pack out for an OTB SR. And by the way, I've never swam in the ocean before. So now I'm about to, at night, get dropped off, swim through the surf zone. Yeah.
With a
recon
rock loadout.
Oh, yeah.
Which is no joke.
Enormous. So he's like teaching me how to like load my stuff out, and then I'm like, hey, what about like warm weather stuff? He's like, this is recon, bro. And then, by the way, this is wintertime. And then he's like, this is recon, bro. Like, we don't take that stuff. And I'm like, okay, It's like, check. He's like, we take batteries and this and that. He's like, I'm like, okay, got it. And then I'm like, hey, question, how am I getting this ruck through the surf? Because it's heavy. He's like, oh, you can put flotation on it. I put a ton of flotation on mine because I'm like, damn, I'm going to drown. So we go and we do the SR. I make it through the surf zone, just sheer will. But I mean, I must have swallowed like a gallon of water going through the surf zone. It was my first time ever. But I'm trying not to be the weak link.
Fifi, what is it?
A Fifina. Yeah, I'm trying not to be a Fifina. So we make it through, and we change out and we start patrolling, and then we get to the place where we're gonna set up camp, and then everybody starts busting out their warmies.
Hell yeah, they were.
And I look around, and I'm like, damn it. And they're like, hey, what's up, Doc? Like, where's your stuff? And I'm like,
we're recon.
I was like, I thought that we didn't bring warmies out. And they're like, no way, bro. Like, we bring a ton of warmies out. And I was just like, oh, and I'm freezing cold.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's wintertime out in Camp Pendleton. We just went through the surf, so I'm still wet. And finally, I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to volunteer to just watch the radio all night. I was like, there's no way I'm sleeping tonight. And so I did. I just jackhammered all night long, watched the radio, and would get up and walk around just to try to keep myself warm. And the Marines loved it, because I volunteered to do watch all night long for the rest of the SR. But that was my introduction.
When I got to the teams, I was a new guy. Didn't have my bird yet, and I got sent to a comm school out on the East Coast that was run by the teams. And I was a new guy, and my swim buddy was a new guy. Two of us, and there was a 5 or 6 day FTX that you went on at the end of this comm school. It's a 2-month comm school. It's freaking legit. It was a great course. And the chief that was running it, I was like asking him questions because I was wanting to know, what would be a good thing to bring when we're in the field. And I said, hey, our guy, should I bring like a sleeping bag? Should I? And he goes, if you're hardcore willing, because, I was always trying to be hardcore. He's like, if you're hardcore willing, he was bringing a poncho and a poncho liner. And I was like, well, check. I am fucking hardcore.
Yeah.
And I'm just bringing a poncho and a poncho liner. And I did. And that's what I went out in the field with. And as we inserted, the first night, it was raining as we inserted. It turned to sleet, like as the vehicles pulled up to drop us off, and then it turned into snow. It was balls cold. And on this course, you had like a comms window. Every 2 to 4 hours, you'd have to make comms to some different part of the country. And most guys would like miss comm windows, and that would be, you were getting graded the whole time. And if you had the best grade at the end, then you get extracted early. And so my swim buddy, same thing. Like we were trying to be hardcore, so we didn't have warmies for shit. We freezing, and we never missed a comm window. And the reason we never missed a comm window is because we couldn't freaking sleep. It was just like freezing. But yeah, that's always bring a ground pad and always bring a bivy sack, because that's what I learned eventually. The bivy sack is the deal. If you got a bivy sack, you can climb in there and you can pretty much just gut through some serious shit.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's good. That's the way. That's what happens to the new guys.
Yeah.
Don't believe when your chief says we don't bring warmies. He's full of shit.
Yeah. Well, actually, the recon corpsmen that were there, they were cool about it, because they were like, "Hey, we heard what happened. Like, dude, I'm not gonna say the guy's name. He's like, he totally hooked you up, huh?" I'm like, "Yeah, he did." So at that point, they put me into RIP, which is the Recon Indoctrination Platoon. So basically, it's you competing for a slot at BRC, which is like their selection process.
And that's the one that's. Is it still in Coronado?
It's in Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
So RIP is in Camp Pendleton.
What's the one that there used to be something in Coronado?
That's BRC.
Got it.
So in RIP, they put everybody in there who just showed up to the battalion, and you're because there's only 30 slots, so you're competing. So the top 30 guys go to BRC. If you didn't make that cut, you go through RIP again, and hopefully you make it through you're in the top 30 next.
How long is RIP?
So there's no like real timeline to it. I think it was just like, hey, you're just doing it until the next class of BRC shows up, and then they start ranking you, and then you get your slot. And so, the corpsmen were like, hey, just so you know, like, Marines are always harder on the corpsmen. Don't let us down. And so I go to RIP, and I'm doing well on everything except for land nav. I can't freaking land nav to save my life, dude. I was just getting lost, and I was really getting down on myself. And then one day it just clicked. Like I looked at the map, and I'm just like,
It came to life.
I get it. Yeah, I don't know. It was just like this moment, like a light bulb moment. And from that point on, like I was like, land nav, got it. So I was able to secure a spot to BRC. So I go to BRC, which is in Coronado, and that's where I start seeing like the Buds guys, and I'm like, dang, I wish I was here, but I'm here now, and I did pretty well in BRC. There was a guy there named Mendoza, and he was not good at all, and the instructors would get us confused. And so I would be running by and like, hey, you drop. And I was like, okay. And like, I heard you lost your map and this and that. And I was like, that wasn't me. That was Mendoza. And they're like, oh. They're like, well, push him out anyways, And then finally this guy, I don't remember if he quit or if he got dropped, but thank goodness. Because then once he got dropped, I'm just like, cool. Because he was just messing up left and right, and they would get us confused. Mendez and Mendoza. So I had to pay the man a few times for his stuff. And then sometimes they're like, you know what, both of you. Just pay the man.
How long is BRC?
If I remember correctly back then, I think it was like 2 months long.
And so you finished it?
I did not. I actually got a stress fracture about 2 weeks from graduating. And, they sent me back to the BAS with the corpsman. I got x-rayed and everything. Like, yeah. And at the time, they were like, hey, how was he doing? And like, actually, he's ranked number 1 in the class before he got dropped. So he's like, he's welcome to come back. And then at that point, they're like, hey, do you want to go back? And I said, no. I was like, I want to go to Buds. I made my decision. I was like, hey, I want to do this. Like, because here's the thing. Like, if you finish, now you owe them time. Because after that, they send
BRC,
you. Yeah, if you finish,
them.
then they send you to jump school, dive school, and now you belong to them because they've invested money into you. And it was kind of funny, too, because when I went, they were like, somehow it came up that I wasn't a citizen. And they were like, oh shit, you're not a citizen? Like, you actually weren't supposed to go to BRC if you weren't. So they were like, let's get you some citizenship. So they kind of fast tracked me, and I was able to get my citizenship. And so they're like, hey, for the rest of the time here, we're just going to attach you to a platoon. And
so they approved you going to Buds. They were like, all right, if that's what you want to do,
yep,
cool.
They were they were awesome about it. I had great leadership there. They were great, like super professional guys. I still keep in touch with some of them. So like, hey, I'll tell you what we're going to do till you get orders and you go, we're just going to put you in a platoon and you're going to do a workup deployment and you just be the corpsman. And then when you get your orders to go to Buds, you go. So that's what I did until I got orders to go to Buds.
Were you worried about the stress fracture scenario? Because like that's all kinds of people get stress fractures in Buds.
I wasn't, because I never, I was like, oh, I'll heal up. I'm young.
No factor.
Yeah. So I got orders to go to Buds in November of 2003, right? Or 2002. Sorry, 2002.
November of 2002. So where were you when 9/11 happened?
I was at the recon battalion, but they were like, hey, I don't think we got deployed, or anybody from that battalion got deployed to Afghanistan at that time. But I was still there. But, you know, at that time I already had my pass, so they were like, hey, even if you go there, you're not going to go with the platoon.
So then when'd you get to Buds finally?
November of 2002.
What you expected? I mean, you must have been pretty freaking kind of ready for it at this point.
Oh yeah, I had run with a ruck. I had done OTBs, countless OTBs. I was really good at land nav. I mean, like I got attached to a platoon, did a workup deployment with them, so I was ready. And so when I showed it, like, oh, here's the thing too. They sent me to like a combat engineer battalion. They're like, hey, we're gonna send you, like, you can't be in the platoon anymore because they're about to deploy. And, you know, obviously it's going to overlap. You're going to start Buds before. We're not going to bring you home halfway through deployment. So they're like, go to this combat engineering battalion and you can work out all day. And that's where I met this guy named Captain Gwynn, who had like a master's degree in kinesiology and was all about in the fitness. And when he learned that I was going to Buds, he's like, let me train you. I was like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. So he got me even more prepared. Like, we worked out 3 times a day, in the morning, at lunch, and afterwards. And then he started teaching me how to eat properly. So when I got to Buds, I was ready. Like, I could do 30 or more pull-ups, 120 push-ups, 120 sit. Like, I was a machine when I got there.
And your water had obviously improved?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. At that point, I'd done countless OTBs, and, yeah, that was good to go.
And then did you get what you expected there in Buds? Any issues or anything?
So when I got there, I'm like, you know, everybody tells you, oh, you got to be the gray man. So I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going to be the gray man. But unfortunately,
and by gray man, people that don't know, this is just a term to explain. If you can go to Buds and you can kind of not stand out, that's a good thing. Because there's very few people that stand. There's only might be 1 or 2, maybe 3 people in a class that stand out because they're good. But the people that stand out because they're bad, and then once you got someone watching you, then everything they're going to start seeing all kinds of things that you're doing that are jacked up. So one of the strategies of going to Buds is to try to be the quote gray man, meaning just be in the middle, finish the stuff, don't stand out, don't draw any attention to yourself. And that's a good strategy for getting through. And you had heard, I don't think we had that. I don't think that was a term when I went through. But I kind of instinctively, well, everyone instinctively knew you didn't want the freaking instructors to know your name or your face, or you just wanted them to ignore you as much as possible. So, you know, you just try to do what you're told and try and, you know, try not to stand out.
And that was the plan. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to shine. You know, I'm just going to stay in like the top 25%. But that was not possible because when I first got to Buds, you know, you're standing watch when you're waiting to class up. And, you know, a buddy of mine there in Buds was like, hey, let's go out one night, you know, before we go out. So we go out and we party. And
how old are you?
I'm 22.
Okay.
Yeah, 2002, I'm 22.
Yeah. I was young, so I couldn't, going out wasn't a thing. I could go to the bar, the E Club on base you could drink when you were 18. But I wouldn't even want to do that. I just want to make it through Buds. So it's weird to me. It's weird to me, like having a guy like, hey, let's go out to a bar, because I can't fathom what it would be like to go to a bar when I was in Buds.
Yeah. So we go out and he starts talking to this girl, and then he's like, hey, bro, like I need you to, you know, her friend really likes you. Like I need you to entertain her while I'm with this girl and blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, I got a girlfriend. He's like, come on, man, we're going to be in the teams. Like, you're supposed to have my back. He's like, you don't want to be known as that guy. And I'm like, really? Like, you're going to play that card with me? So I'm like, dude, I'm not digging it. You know what? I'll talk to her. I'll keep her busy for you. But I could tell she's into me. Like, she wants more. And he's like, dude, we're going to go back to their place. And I'm like, dude, I really don't want to. He's like, bro, come on. You got to do this for me. I'm like, listen, I think she wants more than what I'm willing to give. Because 1, I wasn't attracted, or 2, you know, I had a girlfriend at the time. And then, so I'm like, all right, dude, like I'll go back to their house with you. And when we get there, I see her car and it has a 1st Recon Battalion sticker on it. And I recognize that sticker because it's a sticker for different parking lots. You had different stickers, and that was like an operator sticker. Like if you got to park in the operator parking lot. And so I was like, hey, where'd you get that sticker from? And she's like, oh, I could tell she's getting flustered. And she's like, my husband. And I'm just like, and in my head, I'm just like, Yahtzee, this is my out. And I'm like, bro, we cannot do this. We got to go. I was like, I am not doing it. Now I have a legit reason to not go through with this. So we take off. We go back to Bud's. And now I'm standing watch on Monday morning, and I get a phone call. I'm standing watch at the quarterdeck with another guy, and I get a phone call from the 618 quarterdeck. Mm-hmm. So 618 is where the barracks are at. So you have the Bud's quarterdeck, and you have the barracks quarterdeck. And it's one of the guys in my class, and he's like, hey, Los, there's some Marine here to see you. And it didn't even honestly, dude, it didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah, because you were in the Marines.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, cool. One of my buddies is coming here to visit me. I was like, that's awesome. I was like, cool, man. What's his name? And he's like, hey, bro, what's your name? He's like, he doesn't need to know my name. He slept with my wife. And I was like, what? I was like, I didn't sleep with his wife. And I'm like, bro, tell him I could explain, like, nothing happened. Like, I didn't know she was married, blah, blah. So I'm trying to explain. And all I hear is this guy in the background saying, like, I'm gonna kill this guy. Like, I want to talk to him right now. And I'm like, dude, I'm on watch. Tell him I'm on watch. And when I get off at noon, I can talk to him. And he's like, no, I want to talk to him right now. And then I'm like, fine. Tell him to come up to the Bud's quarterdeck, and I can talk to him here. And I guess tell him nothing happened. Like, dude, I don't know what's going on in your marriage, but nothing happened. So then my buddy's like, dude, he's headed over there, and he's big. He's a huge dude. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm sitting there, and then the other guy that I'm with, he's like, bro, you have to tell the instructor, like, you have to tell the OOD. He's like, there's no way. You get in a fight here on the quarterdeck, you're done. And the OOD happens to be a first phase instructor that day. So I'm just like, oh my goodness. So I'm like, all right. So I go to the first phase office, I ring the bell. I'm like, HM3 Mendez, here to see instructor so-and-so. And the whole first phase staff is in there.
Oh, because this is in the daytime.
Yeah, it's in the daytime. Yeah, this is morning. So I go in there, and at that time, all the instructors at Bud's were, like, enormous. They're all, like, 6'2" and up, just jacked out of their minds. Like, I swear they do it on purpose for intimidation factor. But at the time, they were all enormous. So I go in there, and they're, like, drop turd. So I'm in the push-up position in my dress blues, and they're like, what do you want? I'm just like, some Marines coming over to kick my ass. And they're like, would you screw his old lady or something? I was like, nobody thinks I did. And they're like, who's this Marine coming over here to start some shit? Like, let's go over there and beat his ass. So the entire first phase staff's like, yeah, let's go over there. So they all head over there to the quarterdeck. And at the time, there's like some guys from like Team 5 that were waiting there to screen for another team. And some of them knew each other, so like, hey, what's up? And they're like, oh, Sabrine coming over here to start some shit. And they're like, hell yeah, let's beat his ass. So now I'm like, yeah, come on over here, And so we're waiting, and nothing happens. And I'm like, dude, where is this guy? And then the phone rings, and it's my buddy from 618. And he's like, hey, bro, I heard what happened. I was totally messing with you. And I could literally feel the blood just like drain from my face. And then the instructor's like, is it him? And I was just like, I couldn't speak. So I just handed him the phone. And then he's like, this is instructor so-and-so, who is this? And he's like, oh, this is airman so-and-so. Like, where's the Marine? He's like, it was a joke. He's like, oh, you got jokes? I got jokes too. He's like, you and Mendez in your wetsuits, 2 canteens on the grinder.
Get some.
Oh, yeah. We got beat. He ended up quitting shortly thereafter. But there was no being the gray man. They all knew my name.
You were the man.
Oh, yeah. And it was just like, from that point on, I'd be like, where's Mendez? Doesn't matter. Hit the surf. Oh, you passed your uniform inspection. That's great. Hit the surf. So, yeah. So I was like, all right, well, if I'm not going to be the gray man, just go balls out, I guess. Might as well.
Freaking legit. So you're not the gray man anymore, and you're just going hard. Did you have any issues in Bud's?
Yeah, I did. No, not with the
Bud's finds the issues, man.
Yeah.
It finds your issues.
Yeah, during one of the surf passage evolutions, I had one of the paddles come across and like break across my shin. And so I had this huge bruise on my shin for a while, and I was like, whatever. And I just kept going through training. And at one point, I realized that when I would press down on my muscle, it would just stay. And my knee got really swollen. I could barely move it. And I'm a corpsman, so I know. I'm like, dude, these are like symptoms of compartment syndrome. But I didn't want to say anything. So I made it to the weekend, and I went back up to the recon battalion. And I'm like, hey, guys, like, is this what I think it is? And they're like, I think it is. Like, dude, you need to go to the hospital. So I was like, well, I don't want to go to BUD/S because I don't want to get dropped or rolled or whatever. So I checked myself into Camp Pendleton Hospital. And then they're like, dude, you got to get this drained. You either have to have surgery or you have to get this drained. And I was like, well, can we try draining it first? And he's like, yeah, sure. So they got this enormous needle. I mean, it was thick too. And they just started like draining the blood from there. And they're like, dude, you're not going to be able to finish BUD/S and whatever. I was like, no, I'll be fine. So I go back to BUD/S, and then the instructors got word that I had checked into medical up there. And they're like, dude, we have a medical here. They were cool about it.
Yeah.
Like, I thought they were going to be pissed, but they were like, hey, you know, they liked me at that point.
What phase was that?
First phase.
Oh, damn.
This was before Hell Week.
Damn.
Yeah, before Hell Week. So it was like the week before Hell Week. And then they were like, hey, no big deal. We'll just roll you to the next class. And I was like, you know, it was extremely disappointing. So I got rolled. And then I got rolled into 245. And then the run before, like the last day before we started Hell Week on a run, I stepped in a pothole, or I stepped in like a hole in the sand, and I twisted my ankle really bad. Like, this thing was enormously swollen. And then I was like, no, it's fine. Like, I'll go through Hell Week and, you know, I'll be fine. And they're like, dude, you're not going to be able to go through that. And in my head, I'm like, this is twice now. There's no way they're keeping me. And the proctor at the time, he's looking through my record, and he's like, dude, you haven't failed a single evolution here. Like, not a uniform inspection, not a room inspection. And you know how they are over there. He's like, not one? I was like, no. So, you know, I had attention to detail from A, my childhood, and B, you know, my time with the Marines.
Yeah,
like, I had
sure.
attention to detail, and I could follow directions. That was like that was the one thing I could really do. So they were like, you know, you haven't failed anything at all. They're like, you know what? We're going to roll you one last time. And then, you know, last time I made it all the way through, no issues. So.
And then where'd you end up going from there?
So, you know, you got jump school, SQT, Alaska, and then I was a corpsman. So they sent me to 18 Delta to go through the special operations medic course.
Which is freaking long too.
Yeah, it's a little over 6 months. And if you go through the full course, it's like a year long.
Did you go through the short course or the long course?
Yeah, so I went through the short course. They asked me if I wanted to do the long course, and I said no, I didn't want to do that. But before I headed out there, you know, I'd been dating the girl I was telling you about in BUD/S, and we actually ended up getting married before I went out there. And I did it because when I was going, so I had just bought a house too. So I bought a house around that time in San Diego, or not in San Diego, it was in Temecula because I'm an idiot. You know, and I was like, oh, look at this big ass house I could buy out here for cheap. You know, back then it was really cheap out there, and I didn't realize like how long that drive was. So, so I got married because I'm like, hey, I really need the San Diego BH, because I spoke to the admin lady at BUD/S, and she's like, yeah, if you have a house and you're married and you're here, you're gonna get San Diego BH and not North Carolina BH, which is like, it's pennies compared to San Diego.
So once again, why'd you get married? Want that BAH, son?
Yeah. I did love her.
I'm sure there's other reasons.
But yeah, so the reason I bring that up is because that was actually a sticking point when I was there. It was an issue because as I was going through the training, I wasn't getting paid at all. I was getting zero.
Like
BAH.
no money?
No BAH.
No BAH, okay.
Which is a big deal because now I got a mortgage, and so I'm digging into my savings, and I had been going, to the cadre that were there. They have some SEAL cadre there as well. It's not like all Army guys. Obviously, they have the liaisons for NSW. And, I kept going up to them and telling them, like, hey, I still haven't gotten paid. And they were just like, oh, don't worry about it. And, like, it'll happen. Like, I just felt like they weren't concerned about it at all. And if we're being honest, I wasn't a fan of theirs. Like, I just didn't get a good feeling from them. And I'm really digging into my savings. And now I'm running out of money. And I don't know if you know who Captain Smithers is. So he was the CO at BUD/S when we were there. And obviously, like, they knew who I was because of what happened. So, you know, him and I had chatted every now and then, and he actually came out and did some jumps with us. And at one point during one of the jumps, like, he was sitting next to me, and he was like, hey, you know, just so you know, if you ever need anything, reach out. You see where this is going?
Yeah.
So I call Bud's quarterdeck, and I'm like, you know, Bud's quarterdeck, and I'm like, yeah, can you please transfer me to Captain Smithers' office? So I told him the story. I'm like, hey, I haven't gotten paid. Like, these guys have totally blown me off. They haven't been helpful at all, blah, blah. And he's pissed. He's like, check. So he has Commander Zinke call me. And Commander Zinke calls me, and then he's like, that's unsat that you've gone that long without getting paid. So he calls over to the school. I get paid like 2 weeks later, but I get brought in and just chewed out by this senior chief and chief that are over there. And they're like, you know, do you not understand how the chain of command works and blah, blah. I mean, they were furious. And they're like, you know, we're going to take you to a Trident review board. We're going to drive you down to Virginia Beach and have a Trident review board. And I'm like, dude, are these guys serious? So I go back home and I start calling like my recon buddies. I'm like, hey, is it cool if I come back? Like, I think they're going to pull my Trident. And then they're like, dude, heck yeah. If you get dropped, come on back. So, you know, I go in there, and then during one of the ass chewings that I'm getting, I'm like, you know what? I'm like, if you guys really take me to a Trident review board, this is like, what consumed you to call Captain Smithers? I was like, we're friends. And I was like, and if you take me to this Trident review board, I'll call him again. And they were like, now they like lost their mind. And then they're like, you'll be hearing from us when it's time for your Trident review board. And then I just never heard from them. They left it alone, and I got paid like 2 weeks later.
Damn. Check. Anything else from 18 Delta?
Well, that's where I met, I met Johnny Kim.
Oh, right on.
That little genius. Yeah, so he was in the class behind me. I met Johnny Kim. I was also roommates with Dauber.
Oh, right on.
He was my roommate
nice.
at 18 Delta, so it was pretty cool going through with him. But yeah.
And then those guys ended up coming to Team 3, and you ended up going to Team 1?
Yeah. So I actually was initially supposed to go to Team 3, and then the corpsman that went to Team 1, for whatever reason, he couldn't get a security clearance. So they're like, hey, you're going to go to Team 1 now, who's already started their workup. And then, Dauber was the first one to get orders to Team 3. So, yeah, that's how I showed up Team 1, I think, 2005.
Are you just fully amped to be at Team 1? Just beyond. And the war's going on.
Exactly.
Guys are going on deployment.
Yeah.
You get thrown right into a platoon?
Yeah. So I get thrown into the platoon. We start, they've already started their workup. And it was everything that I thought it was going to be. It was awesome.
The best job ever.
I mean, it really was. I mean, we would go to, Mississippi for training and do CQC, and then we would go to Kentucky for SALC, and then we, around that time the PSD mission was going on, so like, hey, we gotta go to driving schools. So we would go to driving schools, and it was just awesome. Like, I loved being around the guys. Like, it was everything I thought it would be. It was pretty cool. We had some issues in the platoon though. Mm-hmm. We went through 3 different chiefs.
Dang.
Yeah. So the leadership was a little bit of a problem. And then I think the last chief that they brought in there, like, I don't think he was really into it. He was just like, yeah, I'll do it, And
crazy thing, one of the crazy things I learned at TradeEt when I was working at TradeEt was, look, you're gonna have some weak chiefs, you're gonna have some weak officers, but if you have some good dudes in there, you'll just overcome all that. Yeah. You just overcome all of it, and the guys are going to figure out. Oftentimes, the SEAL team succeeds because of the leadership from somewhere in the platoon. It doesn't have to come from the OIC. It doesn't have to come from the chief. Now, those guys can be bad enough that they actually squash the junior leadership, and that's when you have a platoon that just falls apart completely. Yeah. But if I've seen OICs that were just completely getting carried by some 2 E5s in the platoon. The OIC and the chief getting carried by 2 or 3 good E5s. I've seen that all day long. I'm sure you did too.
Yeah.
But occasionally you'll get a chief or a OIC that, look, when they're great, that's great. We're all good. but it's occasionally they'll squash the junior leadership because their ego gets involved and they don't want someone else making calls, and it just turns into a total disaster.
The OIC wasn't very well liked either.
So you guys do you guys know where you're going on deployment?
No, because we're competing for where we're going at the time. And like I said, unfortunately, the leadership didn't build good relationships up the chain of command. So even though the platoon was awesome, like we had some really talented people in that platoon, really talented people in that platoon, and it is what it is. They just build we were not the favorite platoon. And it was around that time when the LPOs came up to me. He's like, hey, we're short snipers. I know you were a Marine, you were good at land nav, blah, blah. Do you want to go to sniper school? And I said, yeah. He's like, 2 caveats. He's like, 1, it's Army sniper school, and 2, you got to go to UAV school afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, fine, whatever. Just send me.
Yeah, it's so weird how your mentality can be so unaligned with other people, and they're giving you these quote caveats.
Yeah,
bro. When we ended up going to Ramadi, we were supposed to go to Baghdad and tasking a bruiser, and my commanding officer calls me in, and he's like, he's presenting this thing to me like it's the worst deal ever, and I'm like so happy, and I'm just poker face, like, hey, Roger that, sir, we can make some adjustments. And then I was like, oh, I can negotiate. And I said, well, we're gonna need this, and I'm gonna need some more people and some more like support. And he was like, yeah, we can take care of that. Totally hooked me up, bro. But I was like, oh, are you serious? You're gonna send us to Ramadi instead? Let's do this.
Yeah.
He was throwing caveats at me. I'm like,
yep,
no problem,
he's
sir.
Like,
we got
Army
this.
school. We're gonna have to send you UAV school. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to hold my excitement in. So I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So, so I ended up going to Army sniper school, and that was cool, going to Army school, and it's pretty funny dealing with the Army guys. So at one point, so they sent another guy with me. So they sent 2 of us to sniper school. And we go out to a bar one night, and we see some of the guys from our class. And at that point, they were kind of standoffish because we were being quiet too. We hadn't really talking to people. They see us at the bar. And then like, hey, you guys are the SEALs in our class, right? And we're like, yeah. They're like, you guys mind if we buy you a shot? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I'm like, cool. So they buy us a shot, and I take this shot, and it's the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted in my life. Like I want to throw up. And it's funny because I take the shot, and they're like looking at us, and I'm like, thanks guys. Even though inside I'm like, what the hell was this? So I set it down. I'm like, thanks fellas. And they're like looking at me like, dang, that's why they're Navy SEALs. They didn't even flinch. So I guess they gave us like some gag shot that's supposed to like make you throw up.
Yeah, and you just
and both of us were just like
normal face all day long. Yeah,
no expression, like thanks fellas. But inside I'm like, what the fuck was that? It was disgusting. And then they're just like, dang, that's why they're Navy SEALs. Did you see that? They didn't even flinch. And then then we had another, we were back in training, and they were like, oh, you guys didn't load up in the truck fast enough or something like that. And they're like, oh, this one guy was like freaking out, like, guys, if we don't do this fast enough, we're going to get beat. I'm like, so what if we get beat? Like, okay. And one of the instructors heard me, but he didn't know who I was. So he was just like, oh, we got a tough guy in the group. He's like, all right. He's like, come on out. So he's like, push-ups, I'm doing push-ups. I do push-ups. And then he's like, okay, flutter kicks. And by the way, like I used to do so many flutter kicks that I got tired of counting, and I would literally set my timer for 10 minutes straight and would just do flutter kicks for 10 minutes straight because I didn't want to count anymore. So he's having me do these flutter kicks. And I can tell one of the other instructors is like giggling behind him because the guy doesn't know who I am. He's like, oh, you're kind of good at these. And then the instructor's like, bro, he's a SEAL, right? He's like, dude, why didn't you tell me? I'm over here like an idiot trying to break this guy. He's not going to break. And then afterwards, like he's like, you want a dip? I'm just like, no, I don't dip, but thank you.
Yeah. Jack. So you end up going on deployment. You go to PACOM deployment. That's where you guys went, right?
Yeah. So the majority of the platoon got sent to Guam, and then they were like, hey, if you're a UAV pilot, a sniper, or a corpsman, you're going to go to the PI. And I was all 3.
3 for 3.
3 for 3. So that deployment was kind of weird for me because I wasn't with my platoon for the majority of the time. Like I was literally getting farmed out to whoever needed me. So I went to Tawi, Holo, Zamboanga. There was times where I got attached to like an ODA unit because they didn't have their 18 Delta with them. And you know, I got attached to them, and there was a point there on the deployment where I got sent on a ship, you know, because that's how I was getting transported from one place to another. And at the time, I had another OIC.
Just the way you said that, you're like, I got sent on a ship.
Yeah. Well, that was like the one thing that I dreaded.
Yeah.
You know, I was going on a ship. So this was like my first ship experience. And I'm there with my JO, who is a prior Force Recon gunny.
Damn.
You probably know who he is. Very tall dude.
Yeah,
looks
yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
Just tatted up.
Yeah.
And so we're on this ship together, and we go to chow, and I was like, hey, sir, you know, this is where you and I part ways. I got to go eat with the enlisted. You got to go to the officers. He's like, I'm not eating by myself. He's like, you're coming with me. And we're wearing sterile camis. So no name tapes, no rank, nothing. So we go into the chow hall with the officers, and I'm just like, oh, no. So I'm sitting there, and you can tell, like, there's this surface warfare officer. He's looking at us because he sees my JO. I mean, he's tatted up.
Yeah.
We both don't look like officers.
Uh-huh.
So he's looking at us, and finally he gets the courage to come and sit next to me. He's like, so who are you guys? And then he's like, oh, I'm Lieutenant so-and-so, and this is Lieutenant Mendez. And I was like, oh, dang, I just got promoted from E5 to lieutenant. So for like the rest of the deployment, or sorry, the rest of the time on the ship, he's like calling me sir and whatnot. And at one point, you know, I'm getting off the helo with my sniper rifle, because we were doing like some sniper stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm getting off the helo with my sniper rifle, and the CO knows who we are. We're on his ship, and he was standing next to the CO, and the CO was like, "Hey, HM2, do you mind if I check out your sniper rifle?" And you just see this guy's look. He's steaming inside that he'd been calling me sir for like 2 weeks, and he's like, "Turns out I'm an HM2."
HM2, man. Spot promoted. That's like Andy Stumpf. Spot promotes himself to whatever rank is required. And then you come back from that, just roll into another platoon.
Yeah.
And how's that one go?
It was awesome. I had a new OIC, new chief, new LPO, and this OIC was pretty awesome. I remember when he first got there, he set a meeting with me, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm in trouble. Like, what's, you know, because up to that point, I had very little interaction with my OIC, like very minimal. And I'm thinking, dude, I'm in trouble. So I go in there, and it kind of shocked me that he asked me, like, hey, so what's your family situation like? Like, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? Where do you want to go with your career? And it was like the first time anybody had really asked me. I was like, I don't know, I was just having a great time being in a platoon. You know, and he's like, you know, I noticed you don't have a college degree. There's this program, you know, where you can get commissioned. We send you away to school for 3 years, and you come back as an officer. Is that something you'd be interested in? And I was like, oh, actually, you know, I actually had never heard of that. But yeah, it's interesting. I'll keep it in mind. And, you know, I always say that this guy built a better relationship in the first 2 weeks with us than the prior OIC had built like in 2 years. So it was pretty cool. He tactically speaking, he probably wasn't the best. But strategically, he was great, because he knew who his subject matter experts were. He was a very humble guy, leaned on them a lot. And, you know, the same group was together again, and it was an awesome workup for me. Like, I had an even better time the first time, because I'll be honest, like I was disappointed the first time around with leadership, because I had been exposed to really good leadership with the Marines.
Right.
I mean, they were like just absolute professionals. And then when I got to that first platoon, I was a little disappointed. So I'm like, okay, cool. So that's when I started realizing, like, okay, leadership is, you know, ebbs and flows. Sometimes you get good ones, sometimes you get bad ones, and anything in between. It's a bell curve, just like anything else.
When you were going through, was that when I was running Trade when you were going through that workup? Or
I don't think you were there yet. Yeah, I don't think you were there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, one thing I've always said is the Marines have like a tighter shot group, or like a tighter standard. So like if you have like the best SEAL platoon, they're going to be freaking off the charts awesome.
Yeah.
But the worst SEAL platoon is going to be off the charts shitty. And the Marine Corps has like a tighter, more standardized group of like, hey, this is where they're going to be. They're going to fit in there better, which is nice, because you don't end up with those low points of leadership. And then where'd you end up going on deployment?
So before deployment, actually, they sent me to Central America for a while, because they had a mission going on down there, JSET type mission. They were like, hey, does anybody speak fluent Spanish? I was like, I speak fluent Spanish. So they sent me down there. So I was there for a while. Let's say it was long because they switched other people out. Like, so there's like other guys would go there for 2 weeks or so, but I was there the entire time just because I was teaching all the classes and going out with them and stuff. So I did that first, and then we ended up getting Ramadi. So we're like, okay, cool. We're going to Ramadi for our deployment. So I'm like, finally, this is it.
And when did you show up there?
October. Let's see. My son was born in July, so yeah, September, October timeframe.
Okay. So
I was home for like a couple months after my son was born.
But it had mellowed out a lot by that time.
Oh yeah,
a lot.
Yeah.
So what was the deployment like?
So it started off fantastic. Like when we got there, we hadn't been in country that long, and I remember we got our first mission, and it was pretty cool because they're like, hey, it's a little bit outside of Ramadi, so you guys are going to take helos there. So I'm the point man, I'm planning out the routes and stuff, and I remember getting in the helo and looking around and being like, whoa, this is legit. Like, this is finally here. Like, I've got my, I look around, everybody's got their nods on, everybody's got their weapons, we're in the helo, and it was a DA mission. Like, it's basically everything that you want to do. And so, we get dropped off a few clicks away. I patrol into the target, and I see some guards out there with AKs, and it's the first time, like literally first mission, and I get to shoot someone right off the bat. And I'm like, this is awesome. So I'm thinking that that's the way things are, because I go back to the base and I'm like, oh, I gotta reload my mags. So I'm thinking this is going to be like a normal thing. I better go get some more ammo because, if it's going to be like this all deployment long. And then we actually don't do anything for like a month. And I'm just like, we suck again. But then they're like, hey, listen, there's work to be done, but if you want to do it, you got to go to the outskirts. So we actually ended up packing all our Humvees and going out to Tharthar. And then from there, we were at some small base, and we were like living out of our Humvees, but we were working, which is what team guys want to do. So
for sure.
I thought it was a great deployment. When I hear you talk about your first one, that's kind of how I see this one. You were doing DAs all the time. No one really got hurt. It was great. So,
and you get some good experience. Good to do those reps, man.
Oh yeah.
Like you just the whole cycle from the planning to the transit to the execution, and things aren't going quite right, but you get them sorted out. Like you just get good reps, man.
Yeah. Yep. And as a point man, like it was a really good experience for me. And it's funny because like around that time, my OIC at one point something changed in the plan, and then he's like, hey, we switched course or whatever. I'm like, checks. I was like, let me get under my poncho and my red lens. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, I need to look at my map. He's like, how have you been navigating this whole time? I was like, map and compass, because in the Marines that's how we did it. He's like, you don't have a GPS? And I'm like, no. He's like, if you're gonna be my point man, you need to know how to use a GPS. Because I'm like, under with my poncho, my red lens, like looking at my map and trying to figure it all out. And so I go back to camp and I bust out my GPS. It's still in the wrapper.
Damn.
It's still in the wrapper. So I'm reading the directions, and when I'm reading the directions to this thing, and then I'm like, where's this thing been my whole life?
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Damn, that's crazy. That was in 2007.
Yeah.
I'd always done map and compass.
Yeah, because that's the way I had always done it. In the Marines, we did a ton of land nav. And that's actually how I became the point man, because one of the more experienced guys was like, hey, bro, I don't know how to land nav. He's like, you know how to land nav? And this was like my first platoon. So he's like, hey, you're really good at land nav, right? You with the Marines? I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty good at it. He's like, you want to be the point man? I was like, heck yeah. So that's how I became point man. But no one knew that I was just going off my campus, my compass and map until then. And then when I discovered that GPS, man, it was a game changer.
Yeah, especially by that time, because by that time in 2007, it was like one of the, you'd have them on your wrist.
Yeah.
You'd have them on your wrist.
So that's what I had. I had the little Garmin one. I was like, man, it even goes on your wrist. I'm like, this is amazing.
It's freaking ridiculous.
And then I started carrying two of them around, like one in here and one in my pocket, just in case that one broke down, because now I really liked it. So I'm like, I don't want this thing breaking down on me.
Hey, what up with that story with the S-Vest?
So there's a couple, actually. So the one that we always talk about with complacency, there was like a drone that had watched some guys like planting some IEDs in the road and followed them back to their house. And they're like, hey, you guys are going to go hit this house. I'm like, cool. So our platoon was tasked with hitting that house. And when my platoon gets there, they're like, oh, it was kind of odd because there's just like an old man, some women and children. Like, it's kind of odd. And, as we're on target or whatever, we start finding some like propaganda. We start finding like some small stuff, but nothing huge. And we'd been on target for, I'm going to say, at least like 3-4 hours. So we were there for a while. Like, we got pictures of guys like sitting on a couch. And by the way, this is like a painful story to tell afterwards because, you like to think that you're professionals. And it was definitely a slap in the face. Like, whoa, it's really not over.
Because leading up to this, like, how many ops did you run at this point?
We'd been there for a while.
So you were kind of,
we were in a good rhythm.
You were getting the reps, but the reps start becoming routine.
Yep, and we were in the outskirts too. So like, this house was out in the middle of nowhere. It's not like in Ramadi where it's like a very dynamic environment where everybody starts coming out and they know you're there. So anyways, so we're doing SSE and one of our guys.
So wait, so you hit this target. It's in the middle of vehicles?
Yeah, Humvees.
So you drive vehicles up, you hit the target. Now you've done this a bunch of times. You get the target cleared. No contact when you hit the target.
No.
The people that you find on target is sort of the typical sort of people that you're going to find. Old man, couple women, some kids. The houses looks like all the other houses look like. So in your mind, you're probably thinking, this is probably nothing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had targets like that as well.
And you're there for 3 hours doing SSE?
Yeah, because we started finding stuff. So like guys actually had their helmet and they were like picks and shovels and stuff.
Okay, so
like we were actually like breaking down some walls.
Okay.
So we found some false walls and stuff. And
okay, so suspects. So as you're searching it, you're like, oh, well, this is some propaganda. We need to go a little harder.
Yeah.
Now we go a little bit harder. We find more stuff.
Yep.
And so, but at the same time, there's been no bad guys.
No.
So you're just really just doing an intel recovery at this point.
Yeah.
Which means your guys are kind of chilling out a little bit.
Very much so.
They're sitting on couches.
Yeah.
Shit.
I actually have a picture of that. But so anyway, so one of our guys goes into one of the rooms and lifts a rug up, and there's this there's something on the floor that's a little different color than the rest, and you could tell it's kind of like a door or something. So he calls the EOD guy over. He's like, hey, come check this out, make sure it's not booby trapped. And he's like, nope, we're good. I think we're good. Let's open it up. So we open it up, and there's a bunch of dudes down there. I think it was like 13 to 15 dudes down there, and the first couple had like suicide vests on. Guy chucks a grenade up. It hits our EOD guy in the chest. They dive like behind some furniture. The grenade went low order. So you want to talk about someone looking out for you. It was old, so it didn't blow up to its full potential. And the avalanche call came out because they saw the SVS on the dude. So avalanche, everybody runs out of the house. And as the last dude runs out, our Humvees are already ready to go. And as soon as the last man out, it was like 50 cal, like boom, boom, boom. And we don't know if like a 50 cal hit someone's vest or if the dude clocked himself off, but the house blew up. The house blew up, and some of the guys were still alive, I guess, that were still under even after that explosion. So guys are coming up. Some guys left their helmets and nods inside the house. Ooh. So some guys got no nods. I think a couple weapons were left in there as well. Damn. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you some of the stuff we recovered afterwards. But anyway, so yeah, we're laying down fire, and at one point a rocket is shot, and it hits like 5 feet from our Humvee. So we're like, hey, we need to back out, and we need to drop air on this thing. So we back out, we drop air on it. We actually dropped a couple of bombs on it, and then afterwards when we go and recover stuff, you could tell that these guys that were there, they were foreign fighters. Mm-hmm. They were different than some of the other guys that we had come across. But we recovered some of the nods that we left in there. We recovered one of the weapons that we had left in there. And it's crazy because I guess one of them must have picked the weapon up, like our M4, and started shooting with that M4. And when we picked up that M4, at the front of the barrel, you can tell that the 50 cal round had gone through the front of the barrel, damn, out the back, blew this guy's head off, and then we found this guy's head like 50 yards down the road. But it was crazy. So I mean, we have a picture of the gun like with a 50 cal. So doing that report on all the lost stuff.
That stings. Were you the LPO of this platoon?
Oh no, I was just a
point door
man.
kicker.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You said you were the point man. Yeah.
Yeah. I love being a point man.
So that gets your that snaps you back into reality.
Yep. So yeah, it's
You
complacency.
you said there was a couple SVEST stories.
Yeah, so the other one was, I guess they were smuggling some SVEST in. I forget from where it was. You know, when you're young, you don't pay attention to some of the details that are passed on. But they were importing some SVEST. And at one point, the Iraqi police pulled this guy over who they thought could be one of those guys that was smuggling SVEST. So we take the vehicle and we rip it apart completely. And behind the glove compartment, we find an SVEST. And so our EOD guys take it out, and then they're like, hey, let's make it inert, and let's put it back, and let's see where he goes, and then we'll catch him and his friends. So they do that. They make, they make the vest inert. We put it back. We give the car back to Iraqi police, and at that point, you don't know who's who. So they're all corrupt. You know, there's people that have infiltrated all forms of government and police. So we didn't tell them what we found. We're just like, hey, we're good. So they're like, okay, cool. So they let the guy go, and of course he goes back to his house. And at this point now we're being mandated to bring, the Iraqis with us. Because for a while there, from what I could remember, we were by ourselves, like just us. But at this point, they're like, okay. So anyway, so we end up hitting this house, and old boy has his vest on, and he's like trying to clack himself off, but it's inert.
That's awesome.
And he had actually two switches. Like he had a primary and a secondary. So, he's yelling out, and he's like, click. And he's like, oh, crap. And then he's like, click, click, trying to do the other one. And
how's that working out for you, homie?
well, he's got no head now,
Good stuff, man. And no one got hurt on that where the spider hole was, huh?
No.
Damn.
It's like I said, that's about as good a deployment as you could do. You did a lot of work and no one got hurt.
You get done with that, and then is that when you come to trade it?
Yeah, so I come back and they're like, hey, you're going to have to go to trade it. And I'm like, I don't want to go to trade it,
Are you an E6 now?
I'm an E6. Yeah. Yeah, I just made E6 on that deployment, actually. So, I come back home. I'm having some personal issues, with my wife at the time. And, and instead of trying to work things out and be a good husband, which, I look back on, I could have done a much, much better job of. I look back at that marriage, I'm like, hey, that's 100% my fault. I wasn't a very empathetic person. Marriage is a tough thing, and it's even tougher when you're young, and it's even tougher when you married a teen guy who's gone all the time. And I didn't think about that. I'm just like, she moved right from her parents' house to me, and I'm just like, I don't understand what you're complaining about. Anyways, there's a lot of tension between her and I, and she served me divorce papers. And instead of, trying to take a knee and work things out, what do? They're like, hey, there's corpsmen needed for this Afghanistan deployment. And I'm like, I'll go. So I end up volunteering for a very short augment before I go to TRADET. And they knew that I didn't want to go to TRADET, so they were like, hey, you've got some time here at Team 1 before you check into TRADET. Cool. That was kind of like, my gimme. So they're like, cool, go do that. And so I come back from that deployment, and then that's when I check into TRADET, and that's where I meet JP Donnell.
And did you go straight into SAUC, straight into CQC?
Yeah. So back then, the senior enlisted of the assault cell, he would like interview guys to go to assaults, because he was like, hey, if you're going to come to assaults, like, we're screening you. And so I remember him coming up to talk to me while I was still at Team 1. I had just got back from deployment. So like, yeah, you're going to assaults. So I ended up going to SAUC, but, being the team guy I was like, can I go to CQC too? And they're like, yeah, sure, you can do it. Yeah. So I was doing CQC trips, SAUC trips, and it was pretty cool. And you were there. That's when you were there. And then JP was the LPO at the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
What did you learn in sitting there teaching?
So now looking back, I always tell people that TRADET was actually the biggest learning experience that I ever had, because it's like the ultimate leadership lab. because you get to watch two different styles of leadership go through, and you're completely detached. You have zero emotion or invested into that whatsoever. So you can armchair quarterback that stuff all day long. And it was where, you know, I started realizing the difference in leadership. Because if you think about it, the talent is for the most part spread out pretty evenly.
Yep. You're gonna have some good guys. You're gonna have a handful of new guys. You're gonna have some E5 pipe hitters. You're gonna have some couple slugs. Like, the boys are gonna be pretty consistent most of the time.
Yep.
You're gonna get that. So yeah, it all boils down to just how is the leadership? How good is the leadership? And if leadership's good, platoon's gonna rock. And if the leadership sucks, we could have some problems.
Yep. So that's when I started seeing that, you know. Training is the same, and I was like, oh, okay, it really depends on that leadership, how they're going to do. And it was really cool to see, like, the leadership that did well, it was simply because they were humble. Like, you could just tell their attitude right off the bat. Yep. Like, they're like, you know, when you give them, you know, criticism or critiques or whatever, they're like, got it. Whereas the platoons that did terrible, they were just like, you could just tell they had attitudes about hearing anything, any feedback that you had to give them. And it was very blatant, like the difference between the platoons that had humble leadership and the platoons that just did not.
I would like take this to the nth degree in my own head, because I always wanted to make sure that, hey, what am I doing? Am I doing a good job of getting through to this individual leader, right? And if it seems like this leader, like maybe they have a big ego and they think they're a badass, you know what? I don't care. I always wanted to make sure that it wasn't me, that it wasn't my end. I was like, okay, you know what? The guy's got a big ego. It's okay. We want guys with big egos. Like, hey, you got to have a big ego. Let me rephrase that. There's not, you can't expect SEALs to not have some kind of ego. Like, hey, I know how to do this. Some level of confidence, right? So it's okay. I get it. You know, you think you're a badass. Cool. I don't want to work for someone that doesn't think they're a badass, right? Cool. Yeah. I'm good with it. Okay, let's move forward with that. But man, you'd get these guys that occasionally, again, most of the leaders are like, cool, like we're down. Occasionally, I remember one time we had this one leader coming through SAUC, and I talked to our civilian that worked there, who was a prior, you know, SEAL. He was actually my TU SEA when I was platoon commander. And I said, hey, bro, man, just can you do me a favor? Just check me on this. Like, just look at this guy's face when I'm putting out word and just give me, I go, because it seems to me like he doesn't want to hear anything from anybody. I just want to make sure I'm not totally off base, but can you just check him out? And so sure enough, like as I'm talking, you know, the guy be sitting there with his arms crossed and again, I'm just saying, I'm not even like saying, dude, you're totally jacked up. I'm not saying anything like that. I'd say something like, hey man, do you ever think about maybe, you know, putting some vehicles over here on this target? And you can see the guy's like arms crossed. I'm just offering a suggestion, you know? And the dude, arm crossed. And yeah, we get done with that debrief, and that civilian comes up to me and he's like, bro, this guy's freaking crazy. Yeah. And I said, okay, I just wanted to make sure, because it just, I guess the reason I'm saying this is because the guys in TRADET, the attitude of our guys in TRADET was just to try and help out our friends that are in the teams, like that are in a platoon. That was the attitude. The attitude, there's no like, hey, I know how to do this, you don't. There was no, matter of fact, I wouldn't allow that kind of shit. If we had instructors like that, I would freaking pull them aside, because our instructors realize like, oh, these guys are our friends, they're our teammates, they're getting ready to deploy. We need to do our best to help them out. Yeah. And a lot of those guys know as much as what we know. Right? So you got a guy that's got a bunch of experience, a bunch of deployments. They know as much as we know. So cool. We're not attacking them. We're not talking down to them. So my point is, if you have your friends that are trying to help you and you reject them, it's really, really bad. It's really, really bad. It's horrible, actually. And it'd be such a bummer to see. It'd be such a bummer to see, because literally, like, every guy at TRADET was just, hey, these are my friends that I'm trying to help. And why aren't you open to us helping you, please? Like, we don't want you to get hurt, man. So, good times. This freaking, great place to learn. Yeah. And I was lucky. I did that luckily when I was at SEAL Team 1 as a E5. I worked in our training cell, which is when the the teams used to train themselves. And so I got to do the same thing when I was young, and that's where I learned the most of my stuff, was doing that. Again, sitting back, detached, watching guys go through platoons. We used to run the SQT classes at the team.
Yeah.
So that was really eye-opening too, because now you had the young officers, and you'd watch them and think, this guy can't make any decisions. Why can't he make any decisions? Oh, it's because he's shooting his weapon right now and he shouldn't be. Give him a 2x4, give him a stick, let him get off his gun and he'll figure it out. And then you actually learn how to do that for yourself. So yeah, if you really want to learn something, it's really advantageous to have an opportunity to teach it as well.
Yeah. That was also where I learned how to like brief and not I wouldn't say public speak, but like when you're talking to team guys, you better be squared away. Because they are chomping at the bit.
Oh, yeah.
To like sense any weakness
and
or
attack.
Anything that you say that's maybe not tactically correct. So it's where I learned to be very deliberate about the way I spoke in public and debriefed.
Yeah, and if you don't have anything smart to say, don't say anything. And if you have a thought that you haven't thought through, either think through it or present it in such a way that it's not like an aggressive attack. That's absolutely true. You're in a SEAL platoon. You don't have to be in training. You're in a SEAL platoon and you disagree with someone else. What are the chances that you're 100% right?
Yeah.
The chances that you're 100% right are almost zero. So eventually, probably 2 weeks into my first platoon, I realized, I'm very seldom going to be 100% right. Why don't I present ideas as if they're an idea, not some perfectly formulated, perfectly constructed notion that is 100% true? Because there's so few things that are like that.
Yeah.
Even like I talk about in leadership strategy and tactics, the OIC that I had, that was awesome. He knew more than all of us combined. And he would present ideas as if they were suggestions and ideas, and he was always open to changing those ideas if somebody said something smarter. So you get to see that stuff over and over again. That's what's crazy though. When you're working at TRADET, as you see a platoon tonight, do 3, 4, 5 runs. Another platoon do 3, 4, 5 runs, and then a few weeks later, you're going to see 2 other platoons with a bunch of different leadership do the same runs, basically the same runs with the same people. And the variable is the leadership. And then a few weeks after that, you get to do it again and again and again and again. And you just start to see what works and what doesn't work. And it's real obvious after a certain point.
Yeah. My learning curve was very steep there.
How long did you do at TRADET?
So let's see. I got there in 2008. And I think around 2010 or so, it was like my time to rotate out. But we had gotten a new chief in. And so it's time for me to go do my LPO. But the new chief that came in, I really liked him a lot. Just an awesome guy. And then he was just like, hey, dude, can you stay at TRADET a little bit longer and then be my LPO when it's my time to go? Because I'm not going to be here very long.
Yep.
He's like, I want you to be my LPO. I'm just like, dude, I want to deploy, man. Like, that's a long time. He's like, okay, how about I send you on another augment? I'm like, I want the full one this time. So we're like bargaining here. I was like, I want a full deployment. He's like,
Nice.
Okay, you got it. So I went back to Afghanistan for another augment. It's part of the deal. So,
Nice.
Yep.
And you're getting some good operational experience on your augments.
Oh yeah.
When you're going over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Living the dream.
Yeah, it was really cool. Just to see, watch a different team do different things, and yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from. It was the first time too where I kind of heard the TL like during a gunfight, like just how calm and collected they were. It was just like as if nothing was happening. And then I remember that thinking about that in my head, like, I want to be like that. Like, okay, cool. That's how I'm supposed to be. So yeah, it was a really good experience again. And because, my skin tone, I was able to help them out in ways that, maybe some of the other guys couldn't. So some of the targets had to be done like during the daytime. So we had to like drive around in like milk trucks or something, and because I could fit in with the populace, I just get in like the passenger seat and be the navigation guy.
So you're back to being a point man.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you're dressed
in a
up
car.
like a local populace, and you're able to pull that off.
Yeah, and that's also because so halfway through the deployment, they're like, hey, we need Los back, like at assaults, and then I was like, hey, they want me back. And then the team leader there was like, let me call them. It's like, actually, we really need him over here. So they let me stay the rest of the time.
Freaking beautiful.
Yeah.
But did you end up then going with your chief in TRADET to be his LPO?
No, so around that time, they sent Johnny Kim over to Assaults, like just very temporarily, because he was on his way to go to school. So he got picked up for this program where the Navy picks like 2 people out of the entire Navy, and they send him to go get their undergrad.
Somehow Johnny Kim slid through the cracks.
Yeah, right. So he's like explaining this program to me. Where basically, you know, the Navy pays for you to go to med school afterwards, and it sounded like a good deal. And at the time, you know, I was feeling really guilty. I'm like, dude, I'm just been gone a lot, and I was like feeling like I wasn't like the best father to my son, even though I tried to spend as much time with him as possible. I always had that guilt, and then there's a part of me that was like, you know what, maybe I should get like a normal job and be there for my son. And so on a complete whim, like I put in my package for that exact same program. I'm like, dude, if Johnny Kim is getting accepted to this thing, the chances of me getting accepted are like slim to none. And so I'm getting ready to go back to a team with that chief to go be his LPO. And then I'm flying back from an assaults trip. And then he's like, hey, did you see the results? And I'm like, for what? Like I literally completely just, I applied and just forgot about it. I'm like, dude, you got picked up for that program. I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to school.
Freaking crazy.
Go try to be a doctor.
There was a time period, and it was this was the time period where, I'm not kidding, SEALs had a really good reputation in the world, you know, and certainly in the Navy. And guys were getting picked up left, right, and center for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's freaking crazy and awesome.
Yeah. So what's funny is, you know, like I said, they picked 2 people a year out of the entire Navy, and the other guy was a team guy too.
Yeah, that's
From
my
the East
point.
Coast,
That's
yeah.
my point. Like, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But at that time, man, we like the SEALs were just doing a lot of good work, and I mean, I'm sure that when they looked at your record, like seriously, they looked at your record and compare that to the other applicants. I bet it wasn't even really that close, just because of the nature of what the SEALs were doing at the time.
Yeah.
So, but did you have any intention of like going to medical school for however long that is?
So I thought I did. You know.
So are you a year behind Johnny?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yep.
you're a year behind Johnny, and Johnny went to USD.
So I went to USD.
So you went to USD.
just because I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna do what Johnny did. So we had to go to like that officer school up in Rhode Island.
Okay.
So
Yep.
in January of 2012, that's when I left TRADET and we went to Rhode Island, and it's where you learn how to be an officer.
Do you get commissioned up there?
No,
Or you just go to
you
the
don't,
school?
Yeah, you just go to the school. You don't get commissioned until you graduate from school. But that's actually where, like, you know, they're like, oh, you gotta have blue camis. I'm like, I don't own any blue camis.
Yeah.
And what's funny about that, so I didn't know. So they have the you know, the big blue jackets, and those things are expensive. They're like $350, and I'm already buying all these uniforms that I didn't have,
Right.
Because I don't have any blue stuff, and neither
Because
did
you're
my
gonna
buddy.
have to go to ROTC.
Yeah,
Is that what you're gonna have to do?
yeah, afterwards. But you don't have to wear blue.
Oh, but you had to
camis
get
there.
those blue camis for the knife and fork school up in Rhode Island.
Correct.
Got it.
So the other team guy that's there with me, you know, we go there, and he's cheap too. So he's like, dude, I don't want to buy this jacket. I was like, I don't want to buy it either. I was like, screw it, let's not buy it. You know, I don't need no jacket. You know, even though it's Rhode Island in January. So we form up. Yeah, we form up, and I'm in my blue camis, and he's on blue camis, and you know, the chief who's like the RDC or whatever he's called, you know. He's like, oh, how come you guys don't have jackets? I was like, well, you know, we didn't want to buy them because we're literally going to have them here. We're never going to use them again. And they're really expensive. He's like, well, we're all uniformed around here. So they make everybody take their jackets off. And it's freezing cold. And then he's like, we'll keep doing this until you guys buy jackets. And I told my buddy, don't you dare buy a jacket. And he's like, okay, cool. And we were freezing cold.
Yeah.
But we would just sit there and be like, we're not cold. But we were dying. It's not having school. And it got to the point where they're like, you know, people started crying in the class, like literally like, oh, you know, we're freezing cold. So they're like, all right, change into your khakis. I was like, okay, I'll buy the jacket for the khakis. I might use that later on.
So you get done with that, and then you go to
USD.
USD, University of San Diego. You're going to be doing the same whatever. The same thing Johnny did.
Yeah.
Trying to get your pre-med knocked out.
Yeah.
How'd that go for you?
Not well. I'm not Johnny Kim. I'm miserable. You know, I'm taking like 18 to 21 units a semester. I really didn't enjoy the classes I was taking, like chemistry, biology, just stuff that was so boring to me. And then to top it all off, I'm doing parking services because, you know, USD is a private school, and the Navy only pays like, I think it was like, I shouldn't say only. They pay $10K, and the tuition at USD is like $40K a year, like 40 something K a year. So they're like, hey, if you do parking services, it'll pay you off the rest of your tuition. So it's a good deal. Like if you really break it down, the amount of hours that you work, it's a really good deal. So I'm driving around this cart giving people tickets at USD, and
Bad karma, dude.
yeah. Well, I almost got into this big altercation at one point. So, you know, so this other team guy.
You're the worst ticket guy to mess with. Imagine that. You think you're you think you're gonna argue with some random ticket dude, and it's freaking Lowe's, bro.
Well, it's funny. It's like if I have to hear, you know, do you know who my dad is one more time? I'm just like, bro, I don't know who your dad is. I'm really sorry, but you know, you're parking in a handicap spot. Yeah. But at one point, so the parking, so it's me and another team guy. So the other parking services kids, you know, they're normal kids that won't go into school, and they're like, oh, if you guys want to get a lot of tickets, you got to go down to this area right here. And it was like where the football field or the baseball field was, you know, by the gym. You went to USD, right?
I did, yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about. So my buddy,
I didn't do ticket parking. I used to put my bike in my station wagon and I would park off campus and just bike wherever needed to bike home, bike back to my car and drive home. Yeah.
So at one point, you know, we go down there and it's like the jackpot of all like violations. Like because we were having trouble meeting our quota. So this other team guy and I, you know, the other parking services kids were like, oh, if you go down to this area, you get lots of tickets. So we go down there and we're like, oh, heck yeah, dude, there's all kinds of violations down here. Like we met our quota super quick. And at one point I come up to this car and you got to punch in the license plate to give them the ticket. And it was like, do not call the office immediately if you get this license plate or whatever.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I call and I'm like, hey, this thing came up on my little gadget. And they're like, do not let that person leave. They have like 9 unpaid tickets or something like that. It was an insane amount. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? They're like, well, park your cart behind his car until the tow truck gets there and do not let them leave. I'm like, is that legal? Are we allowed to do that? And they're like, yeah. So I'm like, okay. So I park my cart behind this car. The other team guy, I don't know where he took off to. Like he's gone. He must have been finding like lots of tickets. And so I'm sitting there, I'm waiting for the tow truck, and now I see everybody getting out of football practice. And the guy's car, the car who's, you know, I'm parked behind, the owner comes, and it's a really big dude. You know, he's a football player, he's pretty jacked dude, big dude. And he's like, hey, you need to move your cart. And I was like, hey, bro, there seems to be a problem, like, you know, with your ticket stuff. I'm like, they called the tow truck, but I think if you call them, you know, and work something out. And he's like, move your fucking cart. I was like, I can't. You know, they told me this, and now it's starting to become, and I'm really like trying to be like, hey, bro, like, listen, I'm like the low man on the totem pole, and now the rest of the football team is coming out, and now they're getting fired up, and now I'm sitting there, and I'm like, where the hell is this other team guy at? It doesn't matter how good of a fighter you are. There's a bunch of them. You're going to get your ass kicked. So, and then the guy's like, move your cart now, or I'm going to beat your ass. I'm like, listen, bro, I really don't want that. But listen, if you put your hands on me, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to defend myself. And at that point, I'm thinking, dang it, man, this is really going to happen. And some guy comes running through them all. And then he's like, hey, do you know who this guy is? And I'm like, who is this guy? And yeah, who am I? Like, who does this guy think I am? You know, and then he's like, he's a freaking Navy SEAL. And then you just see their attitude completely like, oh, I'm really sorry, sir. Like, I didn't know, you know, and I was like, hey, bro, it's totally cool. Like, you know, I'm pretty sure if you just call, you can work something out. Turns out this guy was the running back, was a prior team guy.
Oh, no shit.
And he knew that the parking services guys were other team guys that were trying to, you know, pay for the rest of their tuition. So he saved me that day because that probably wasn't going to go down very pretty for me.
And then you eventually just change your major and you get out of the medical program.
Yeah, so at some point I'm just like, I took a finance class as one of my electives, and I'm like, man, I really like this, and I really miss the teams. I don't think I want to do this medical thing. So I changed my major without telling anybody. And then when they're like, oh, so where are you going to go to med school? And I was like, oh, about that. I'm actually, I want to go back to the teams if that's okay. So I want to finish my degree and go back to the teams. And they were livid.
Damn.
They were just like, teams? They're like, no, you're going SWO. You're going to go be a surface warfare officer.
Oh, my God.
So now I'm just like, I don't know what to do. So, you know, I make some phone calls, and they're like, that's stupid. You're not going to go be a SWO. You're coming back here. The only problem is you're going to have to go through the process, just like everyone else. So I have to take the screener, do an interview. I'm like, yeah, that's totally fine. So I do the screener, I go do the interview, and one of the interviewers is my old CO from Team 1. And he knows who I am, you know.
Sweet.
So I'm thinking, oh, this is going to go great, you know. And at one point he asks me, he's like, hey, so what are you going to do if you don't get picked up for special warfare? And then as an officer, you know. And then I was like, well, I think I'm just going to give up my commission and go back to being enlisted. And you just see everyone's head just go, oh. And then at that moment, just seeing the expression on their faces, I was like, oh, man, I said something I wasn't supposed to. And, you know, because you're supposed to say, hey, I want to be an officer no matter what.
Yeah.
And he was really cool about it. He's like, listen, Los, he knows who I am. He's like, I'm going to give you one more chance at this, okay? I'm going to give you another crack at it. That wasn't the best answer. And then I sat there and I'm like, dang it, I might have messed this up. So I sat there for a minute and just thought about it. And I'm like, you know what, sir? I know that the correct answer that you want to hear is like, if I don't get picked up for this, I'm going to go be the best SWO or the best submariner officer on the planet, and then I'm going to make my way back. But I'll be honest with you, I don't want to do that. I was like, I just want to be in the teams. And whether that's as an LPO, a chief, or as an officer, I was like, that's why I'm doing this. I miss the teams. I want to go back. And he's like, that's the answer you want to go with? And I'm like, yes, sir, because it's the truth. And then he's like, it's a bold move. Don't know if it's going to work out for you. I was like, dang. But yeah, eventually I got picked up. So back to the teams. So
Where'd you go? What team?
So I was originally supposed to go to Team 5. And that old chief that I was talking about, the one who wanted me to be his LPO, and then the master chief who was the SCA at assaults, they're like, hey, because they came to my commissioning, they're like, where are you going? I was like, oh, I'm going to Team 5. They're like, no, you're not. You're coming to Team 3.
Boom.
And I was like, well, you know, and they're like, trust me, we'll make it work. So some trades were made. Like they gave up a couple of their JOs, send them to 5, and whoever the JO, one of the JOs was in the platoon, because they had already started workup. Damn. They sent this poor kid away. He already started his workups. Damn. So now I go in there, and I'm there with all my buddies. Like I knew the LPO. I was at assaults with the LPO, the chief.
This is your platoon that you get put into? You're the AOIC?
The AOIC,
platoon?
yeah.
And they're all your boys?
All my friends. From LPO on up. I didn't know everybody else, you know, down. But.
And then, cool, good.
It was awesome. Yeah, the OIC, so they put me in that platoon because they were like, hey, the OIC, you know, he's a really good dude. He's just a little, they use the word timid. He's just kind of shy. He wasn't a very outspoken guy. And then when I heard him brief and I heard him on the radio, I'm like, oh, I see. Whereas like I have no problem getting on the radio. I have no problem briefing. So we actually complimented each other very well because he was a good officer. Like he knew officer things that I did not.
Right.
So he showed me how to be, you know, like a ground force commander. He showed me like all the checklists, all the procedures, and yeah, it was a good experience. And I got a lot of reps, you know, being the OIC because I was good on the radio. So I got a lot of reps, and our chief was a complete stud who I went to buds with. So I learned a ton from him too. He was a JTAC, so he taught me a lot about being a ground force commander.
Where'd you guys go on deployment?
We ended up going to Al-Taqatum. Yeah. So we were there for the AA, just advise and assist. So there was no a company at that time. So we were just behind the FLOT, just calling in, helping them, the Iraqis call in air to try to retake Al-Anbar, which had been retaken by ISIL, or, you know, whatever the name of the week was for them.
Yeah. And that's, how's the platoon, what is the platoon doing as you're doing that?
I mean, so really the only ones that are working are the JTACs. Yeah, they're really the only ones that are working.
But I mean, at least you're freaking killing bad guys.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. But we're also eating mortars a lot because we can't go forward. So we're just sitting back there eating mortars. And at one point, the mortars got really, really close to us, blew one of our Humvees up. As I was running towards it, this Humvee gets hit and just blows me on my ass. So there's definitely a TBI. So they put me on TBI protocol for a little bit, but right around that time, I get an email telling me like, hey, from this chief of mine. Now he's the SCA now. He's the SCA at this point. He's like, hey, Los, we're gonna actually send you to Baghdad, and you're gonna replace this JO as the strike cell commander. And I'm thinking like, why? Like, I don't know anything about JTAC stuff. And the JO that was there, he'd actually gone to like a JTAC school. Really, really intelligent guy, like super intelligent, way smarter than me. And I'm like, what am I going to do over there? I don't know anything about, Now he's like, and so it's funny because as I'm getting on the helo to leave, he's getting there and we're crossing paths. And I'm like, bro, why am I getting sent there? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, don't worry about it, dude. People like you. I'm just like, okay. He's like, you're going to be fine. So, I get to Baghdad and I'm getting the turnover from this JO, and I could immediately see that the general there is just not a fan of ours. And then through conversation, we had burned some relationships there. And backtracking though, when I checked into Team 3, guess who my CO is? It's my first OIC.
Right on, man.
And you want to talk about like a lack of relationship building. When I show up, he was just like, hey, you're that guy that got in trouble for such and such thing.
Right on.
And I'm like,
freaking awesome.
No. I'm like, that wasn't me. That was someone else who doesn't even look like me. Like, he's a white dude. Like, looks nothing like me. So I'm like, way to go, man. We spent 2 years together and you don't even know who I am.
God,
like,
that's crazy.
Yeah. But anyway, so back to the story. The relationship had definitely been strained. I could just tell by the way this general was talking to this JO. It was just like, he did not like us. And, like I said, this JO was very brilliant, really knew his JTAC stuff. And so now I'm left there and I'm thinking like, man, we got to repair this relationship. So that's actually the first thing I started doing. The general was a Marine Corps general. And so I was just chatting him up. He's like, hey, where were you stationed? Where are you stationed at? He's like, oh, Camp Pendleton. I'm like, oh, that was my first duty station. He's like, what are you doing there? I was like, oh, I used to be an FMF corpsman. And his eyes just light up. And from that point on, him and I just start chatting. And then I, start asking him like, hey, what is it that you guys are looking for when you're looking for these strikes to be approved? What can we do to help out what you guys are doing? And he's like, as a matter of fact, we need this, this, and that. And I'm like, check, let me see what we can do about it. And so what my job was I would get all these airstrikes for the next day that my platoon wanted to carry out, strategic airstrikes, and I had to brief them to him and another general, to 1 and a 2-star general, get them approved in a room full of colonels that were all JAGs and super risk adverse. Like, they were denying a lot of the airstrikes, and that's the reason why I sent them over there. Like, hey, a lot of our stuff's getting denied. Go see if maybe you can change that up. So I go in there and I grab one of my JTACs. This is actually where I had like another epiphany where I'm like, you know what, as a leader, I don't have to know everything. I'm like, I have someone who went to JTAC school, so I'm just going to lean on them. Because at the time, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was really like insecure about it. Like, I'm going to go in there and just not know what to brief. So I told him, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm going to brief strategic picture, like why we're doing these airstrikes. Anything technical, you can answer them. And he was like, check. So that's how I would do my briefs. And like I said, I built that relationship with that general. So every time I briefed, and they went around the corner taking the vote, he would always take my side. And once he was in, the 2-star was going to be in as well, no matter what the JAG said. So from that point on, from what I could remember, we got all our airstrikes approved from that point on. And it was just a simple relationship building.
What had the JO, the smart JO, was it something he did, or was it just...
It was not. It was something our CO did.
Yeah. It's just had a bad relationship out of the gate.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he had a bad taste in his mouth, I think, team guys, on that particular deployment. He made some comments here and there that I caught on very quickly, like, check.
God. Freaking horrible. And are you married again at this point?
Yeah. So, so when I was in Trade It, I actually met my wife. She was my waitress at a very classy establishment
Check.
called Hooters. But I went in there with a team guy, and I remember seeing her, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, she's gorgeous. Like, there's absolutely no way someone like that would, go for someone like me. And turns out that I had gone a couple dates with one of her friends. So she told her friend, she's like, oh, I saw that guy, he sat at my table that you were dating. She's like, oh, we're not dating anymore. And she was like, do you care if I get his number? And she's like, no. So that's how we ended up meeting. And so at this point, we've been together for a while since Trade It. And now I was already, at my OIC, and she was just like, hey, you need to marry me. If you don't marry me before this deployment, I'm not going to be here when you get back. So
ultimatum delivered. Check.
And it was a hard decision for me because I was like, man, I love this woman, but we fought a lot. And during that deployment, that one to Iraq, our relationship was very, very stressed.
And you had just gotten married before you went on deployment?
Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm gonna fail at this marriage thing again. Like, what am I doing wrong here? And what's crazy is, like, when I was at Trade It, you talked about the 4 laws of combat a lot, and we talked about, like, find what your red flags are. And in the teams, my red flag when I got overwhelmed was, when that thought came in my head, like, I don't know what to do right now, that was my cue to detach, prioritize, and execute. And for the longest time, I thought that these 4 laws of combat, this ownership was only combat related. And it was the first time in my life where I realized that it's for your personal life too. Because at that point, I got back from deployment. We're still fighting a lot, but I'm like, man, I love this woman. I don't want to fail at this marriage thing again. And in my head, I thought, I don't know what to do right now. And that's when it clicked for me. Like, wait a minute, I've had this thought like literally hundreds of times when I'm on training missions where I'm like, oh, I'm a little overwhelmed. I don't know what to do right now. Detach, prioritize, execute. And so at that point, I'm like, I need to detach, prioritize, and execute in my personal life. And it was at that point in my life where I decided to start taking ownership of my mistakes and realize that, you know what, I'm an imperfect human being too. And I stopped concentrating on everything that I thought was a flaw on her part and just started concentrating on how I could become a better husband. So I'm like, hey, you know what, this is what I do wrong. And this is how I can fix it. I have no control over her attitude. I have the things that I don't have control over, I stopped worrying about them, and I started concentrating on the things that I could control. And at first, it was a little bit of a campaign because you could tell that she was like, what are you doing? and then it got to the point where she started doing the same thing. Like, we just started taking ownership of our parts of the marriage, and I stopped worrying about what she did wrong and only worried about what I was doing wrong. And eventually she started to do the same, and our marriage is completely turned around since then. And it's all marriage. You got peaks and valleys, but it's been just amazing. Kind of like when you're in a platoon, like where everybody's taking ownership of stuff. No one's blaming anybody else. We're just trying to solve problems.
Yep.
And that's how that environment finally was in my marriage. So
yeah, it's funny when you talk about, like, when you're in a platoon and everyone starts taking ownership of stuff, problems get solved. What's crazy is the opposite of that. It's not one level of badness when people aren't taking ownership, because when they're not taking ownership, they're blaming each other. So it's not just, oh, we're going to blame each other, and that's not good. That's not good, but guess what else is coming? Now we're fighting, we're yelling at each other. Like, it causes exponential problems beyond just, it's not just, oh, if I take ownership, the problems get solved. If I don't take ownership, the problems don't get solved. If it was that simple, it'd be like, you probably deal with it. But if now we actually are fighting, we're undermining each other, we're yelling at each other, we turn into freaking idiots. And so, yeah, and that can happen in people's personal lives too. It's not just that, oh, well, we've got this problem in our marriage, and it's not my fault, it's your fault. If that's where it stopped, you might be able to muddle your way through it, but that's not where it stops.
Yeah.
It stops when you say, it's your fault. And they go, what do you mean it's my fault? Actually, here's some 9 things that are your fault. But all of a sudden, we have not just one little problem that's not getting solved. You have exponential problems across the board. It's a freaking disaster.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Now, you came back from that deployment, and you actually did a couple years where you were doing some classified stuff overseas, and obviously we can't talk about things that are classified, but maybe some unclassified lessons learned from what you were doing.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I learned while I was over there is how to build relationships. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I got really into it, and I started trying to perfect that craft by reading books. So I started reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Like Switch, like anything I could help get my hands on, because I knew that when I was over there, it was just going to be me and one other operator. That's it. We didn't have like a support system. We didn't have a platoon. That was us. So we had to build a good relationship with like the local populace in a very short amount of time. We had to build a good relationship with our interpreter. And that's really, honestly, when it boils down to it, our lives depended on these relationships, because at times you're asking some of these people to risk their lives for you. And so that's where I really started delving into, how do I get people to trust and like me to the point where I can influence them in the shortest amount of time. That's really the biggest lesson I got out of those 2 years from doing that mission set.
Yeah. Well, that's something that applies across the board. You know, it's funny when you were talking about the switch going off in your head of like, oh, I can use this stuff. That's the same thing that happened. That's what started all this stuff. I went and talked to these freaking executives about leadership. They started asking me questions, and I was just applying the principles, the 4 laws of combat, take ownership. Like, that's what I started. And it was the first question I got asked. I was like, oh, you have this problem? Okay, here's how you solve it. Just based on the principles that we already know. Yeah. It's like a freaking such a nice moment in my life where I was like, oh, because I was totally institutionalized. I didn't understand. I didn't know anything about civilian companies. I didn't know anything at all about them. And all of a sudden I realized in an instant that, oh, all this stuff applies to all these leadership situations, man. And that's the same thing, going back to building relationships. It's like, oh yeah, guess what? Have you ever had a moment in your life where having an antagonistic relationship with someone you got to work with helps? It's like that has never happened to anybody ever. It's never happened. Where, oh, I don't get along with this person and I have to work with, and it's beneficial to me. Doesn't happen. So why are you not focused on getting to build relationships with people? It's freaking crazy. But good lessons. You come back from that and you go back to Trade It again, right?
Yep. I go back to Trade It as the XO this time.
Damn, XO, Trade It.
Yeah.
What are you? Are you a lieutenant now?
I'm a JO still.
A JG?
A JG, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I did because I didn't have to go through buds and everything else. I did my first deployment as an ensign.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm a JG now, and because I'm prior enlisted, and I knew the CO there at the time, who's also a prior enlisted guy, because actually him and I had done a deployment. We'd done that Iraq deployment together. Okay. At Team 1, and he was like, "Yeah, come on over." I was like, you know, I need to do a disassociated tour, because they were like, you need to, because I was like, hey, can I go back and do my platoon commander? Yeah. And they were like, no. They're like, you need to get away from it for a little bit, because you know they have like a limit on how much time you could be deployed. And they're like, dude, you're like right there. You need to go somewhere and take a knee. So I'm like, Trade It sounds good. I really enjoyed my time there, and so I decided to go back.
And then you're doing the XO billet, which is not quite as fun as doing the.
It's not.
Definitely not as fun as being.
It's not what I thought it was going to be. So the CO actually gets the funner job
for sure,
because he's actually going to the training trips and debriefing. As the XO, you're dealing with everything else, the admin stuff, the disciplinary problems, getting all the meetings at group. So.
Yeah. You were. My career was such a freaking. I was just so lucky at everything. Like when I went there, I was just the OIC, you know. So just going out and training trips and freaking awesomeness. At what point? So how many years do you have in at this point? This is like 2018. So you're coming up on 20.
Yeah.
Is this when you start thinking about maybe doing something else?
Yeah. So I mean, I figured I had the time, so I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go knock out my MBA. I always really enjoyed business, and then through conversations, they were like, hey, after this. They were like, you can't do your OIC until like 2024 or something like that. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do until then? Like, you do more disassociated tours. And I'm like, you know what? That doesn't sound interesting to me. So I think I'm just going to retire. I mean, at that point, I was going to hit 20. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go get my MBA and punch out, retire. So that's at that point where I started looking into MBA programs and trying to see where I was gonna go.
And you end up going back to USD.
No,
is that right?
No, I went to UCLA.
Oh, you went to UCLA.
Yeah. What was funny about that is I was really set on like getting an M7 school, you know, like the Magnificent Seven. So I'm like, I'm only gonna go to like Wharton or Booth or MIT or one of those. And so those are the only ones I applied to. And then I realized that the GI Bill doesn't cover those because they're private schools. Even though like some of them actually had lower tuition than UCLA. And at that point, I had a really good friend of mine, one of my best friends. If you look at his resume, it looks almost exactly like mine, like FMF Corpsman, Teams, USD finance degree. And then he's like, hey, bro, I'm actually going to go to UCLA. And I'm like, why is that? And then he's like, dude, your GI Bill pays for it because it's a public school. And I struggled with that for a little bit.
The GI Bill doesn't cover private schools?
It only covers like a small portion.
Okay.
I was still going to have to take out like a six-figure student loan. And I've always been pretty frugal about my money. I'm like, dang, I don't want to take out this huge loan. And then I kind of went into thought, I'm like, why do I want to go to one of these schools? Like, why do I really want to go? And at some point I realized I just want people to think I'm smart. I mean, we're really like, boiling it down to this most simple form. I just want people to think I'm smart. And I'm like, you know what? I think I have enough to get to where I want to go if I go to UCLA. So I would drive up to LA every weekend to go to school there and knock out my MBA.
And then from there, you went into investment banking, right?
Yeah. So I knew that I like, wait, what do you do after an MBA? Like, oh, everybody does investment banking or consulting. And I always really liked finance. And then my buddy, I was telling about Kyle Roy, when I told him we got exact same resumes, he's like, dude, I'm going to go be an investment banker. I'm like, cool, I'm going to go be an investment banker too. So
is he like a year ahead of you or something?
No, we're in the same class, but he actually knew how to do it. So he actually got in. So there's a cycle to it. And I didn't know that. So when you first get to your MBA program, literally the second you step on campus, you're already recruiting for it. You're already recruiting for the internship for that summer. And then you go to your second year, and after you graduate your second year, you start full time. However, by the time I figured it all out, I was already on my second year. So I was a year behind. And so nobody really wanted to deal with me because it wasn't the traditional path. So I just started reaching out to people on LinkedIn, like sending them my resume. And I would put in like whatever bank, US, like I would put Air Force veteran, Marine Corps veteran. I'm like, dude, if anybody's going to answer me, it's going to be a veteran.
Got it.
And that's how I started getting in, was like a veteran from these banks. They would start reaching out. They saw my resume and they're like, I think they were intrigued. Obviously, the Navy SEAL part kind of stands out. I'm not going to lie. I tell you, that's definitely what got my foot in the door, because some of these other people, it's an extremely competitive job. And some of these people, A, way smarter than me, and B, had like a legitimate pedigree in the finance world. And so...
Meanwhile, you were XO of trade.
Yeah. So I told my wife.
You're a good point, man. Jack.
Yeah, I told my wife, I'm like, dude, when I go to these meet and greets, because it's like 1 million meet and greets, because it's extremely competitive. I'm telling you, it's so competitive. And especially in LA, because in LA, there's a lot less slot. Like if you go to New York, there's a ton of slots in New York, but everybody wants to be warm weather. So everybody's like trying to apply to go to LA. And I told my wife, I'm like, when I go to these meet and greets, like all these people, they're just ridiculously smart. I was like, it's pretty intimidating. And then we had this one interview process where they actually take you in with your other competitors. So it's like you and 2 other people that you're competing with, and then you go and you interview with these bankers. And these interviews were like 3 hours long. Like you would do half an hour with this banker and then half an hour with this banker. And that's when I realized that I belonged there, that I had a shot. Because the very first, that interview process wasn't technical at all. It was all about leadership. So when they start coming up with these questions like, tell me about a time where this happened. I'm like, cool. I have a story for that. I have a story for everything. And it was cool because I would tell my story, and then the guy next to me would tell his story. And it literally got to the point where, I'm not even kidding you, in the interview, the guy next to me was like, I really hate going after him. What am I supposed to say after that? So that's when I'm like, oh, I got a shot.
And you ended up getting hired.
Yeah, I ended up getting the internship. So the internship's like, 9 weeks long. It's basically like a 9-week interview. And it was legit. Like you're working your ass off.
Grind.
Yeah, it's a grind.
And then you had another year of school to complete?
No, because I had actually started my second year.
Got it.
So
your internship went right into job.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the things where I used.
Did you finish school when you were in? Did you finish school when you were in still in?
Yeah.
And then when did you do that 9-week internship?
Did you leave?
Damn.
Yeah, I was already on my way out.
Yep.
It was like
like getting close to terminal leave or whatever.
Exactly. I said saved all my leave specifically for me getting out.
Got it.
And so I used it all up then, and I got hired, and they let me start right away because I didn't have another year of school. So, and then I retired.
And then how'd you like the investment banking world?
I liked a lot of it, and I didn't like other parts of it. I really liked the mergers and acquisitions. So that's what we did. We did mergers, acquisitions, and then leverage buyouts. And we were dealing with big, because I got hired with a big bulge bracket bank. So we were working on like some big deals. And it was exciting. It was cool. It was interesting. It just wasn't cool for 18 to 20 hours a day. Like I worked long days. It was like an early night was midnight. But most of the times I'm building PowerPoints and Excel models till 3, 4 in the morning. Those times where I didn't sleep at all. Like our presentation was due at like 5 a.m. and I turned it in at 5 a.m.
Where were you working out of?
So home, because it was during COVID. Yeah, so I didn't have to move up to LA, which is good because my wife didn't want to move up there. But we were set on moving up there, but it was every time we drove up there to look at places, the drive home would be very quiet. Because we could just tell that neither of us wanted to move up there. But it worked out for me because, like I said, it was COVID. So they were like, hey, we're going to be virtual, for the time being. And I think when I realized, like, I don't want to do this long term is when I saw the managing directors that had been there for a while. Like, I would finish a presentation, and it's like 4 in the morning. Like, hey, you need to call them. I'm like, it's 4 in the morning. Like, you need to call a managing director. He has to look over that PowerPoint before we turn it in. And I'm like, dang, so I guess this never stops. And, it was, and I had a couple TBIs throughout my career. So my migraine, because I wasn't, there was literally nights where I wouldn't go to sleep at all. I'd roll right into the next day. And then my migraines were starting to get more frequent and staring at a screen like all day long. And I'm like, this isn't going to be a long-term play for me, but I'm going to tough it out. For the 2 or 3 years or whatever you got to be to make VP and then move on to something else. And I didn't realize that the job offers were going to start rolling in so quickly. So like once the job offers, like recruiters started reaching out to me, I'm like, I'm going to start looking elsewhere. And around that time is, JP had been talking to me about Echelon Front now for about a year. Like even when I was in Trade Day, he's like, hey, you thought about coming over here? And I was interested, but I just never materialized, And I just went down my path and I told him, hey, JP, this is actually what I'm doing now, and I'm kind of all in on it. And so it's around that time I'm already looking at moving to different firms. I've already got a couple that I'm pretty close to signing with, and then JP calls me one day and he's like, hey, bro, we have a client who, about 50% of his employees speak Spanish. And I told him we could deliver. I was like, you did? He's like, well, yeah, I got you. Because he knew I was fluent in Spanish.
Right.
And I was like, bro, you ever seen Office Space? I was like, that's my life. I have 7 bosses, Bob. So I'm on 7 different deals. And for each deal, I have to get approved. I mean, granted, some of them are have some spillover. So I'm working with, managing director for 2 or 3 different deals. So I'm like, dude, it's going to be so hard for me to get a day off. Like, it's going to be near impossible. And he's like, bro, I really need this. And I'm like, all right. JP's one of my brothers. Like, I love JP to death. So I'm like, let me see what I can do. So I put in the time for 2 personal days. And by the way, a personal day, it's funny when you get the email that says, this is what a personal day looks like. You will check your email, like 6 times during that day. And if you need something, you will answer it. So it's not really like a personal day. You're still freaking working. So I'm like, I took 2 personal days to come out and help them out with this FTX. And so I would literally, teach all day long. And then I pulled an all-nighter trying to catch up on all the work that I missed throughout the day. So I didn't sleep for like those 3 days that I was there. But But it was cool because I showed up, and it was this construction company. And when I showed up, I could tell that some of the guys weren't happy to be there. And not because they were, lazy or anything. They just wanted to go to work. Mm-hmm. They're hardworking people, so they're like, they want to be working instead of being in this leadership course. Mm-hmm. And so let's see, I think it was a Thursday. Yeah, it was a Thursday where the first day of class started. And we split the class in two because they had so many people that we were going to teach one class one day and then the other group the next day. And on Saturday, we did like a debrief, tying it all back into their business. Mm-hmm. So day one, I'm teaching. I could see it that, they'd rather be working than be there. One of their foremen who, it's like one of their rock star foremen, shows up late. Like, same thing. He's like, man, I'd rather be working right now. You don't want to be there. And then at the end of the day, I noticed the switch. Like I could tell that they were enjoying themselves and they were learning stuff and it was clicking. The light bulbs were coming on. And at the end of the day, this foreman, he comes up to me. He's like, hey, man, I'm really sorry that I showed up late. Can I come back tomorrow and do it all over again? I was like, it's fine with us as long as your boss is cool with it. And he's like, okay. So he comes back the next day, and does the full day of training with Echelon Front. And on the third day, when I heard the debrief points and the impact that it made, I mean, some of these debrief points, it was like emotional. Like it was like legit. And I was like, wow, like you guys are doing something really great here. And I felt good about it. Their CEO was just cared so much. He's a super, super intelligent guy, very caring, very humble. And it was just a pleasure talking to him and seeing how much he cared about his team and his people, and then seeing how these other people really started to appreciate the fact that he did this for them, like was trying to develop them as leaders because he cared about them, he cared about the company. And I told JP, I'm like, man, that felt good. I haven't felt good about what I was doing for work for a while since I left the teams. And that's when I was like, okay, let's have a serious conversation of what this could possibly look like for me joining EF.
So here you are. Yeah. That little the little obstacle that you get over with, and obviously I've been doing this for a long time now. There's a little obstacle with some people when they show up for training, and the obstacle is there can be several of them, but one of the biggest obstacles is they don't yet understand that leadership is a skill, and that it's something that they use, and it's something that they can actually learn and get good at. And it doesn't take very long in those sessions where people go, oh, wait, that's me. Oh, wait, I could use that. And all of a sudden they realize this is going to make my life so much better, and it's going to make my team's life so much better. And that is so gratifying to see that. And what's really awesome is when you look up in 3 months, 6 months, or a year, and now you see where that company is, and their trajectory that changes for a company and how they elevate and move forward. Man, it's very, very rewarding, to say the least.
Yeah, every time I do another job, I'm just solidifies that decision for sure.
It's weird. Were you thinking? Because the first gigs that you did was teaching FTX, which is like our field training exercise, which is, JP and I have talked about this where I'm like, hey, JP, people don't need to really like know how to clear a room. Yeah. It's funny. Almost the human instincts that you have of how you would clear a room are good enough to do the FTXs. Sure. It's not about teaching people how to, the tactics of combat. It's about teaching them leadership. But it's funny, like even the plans they come up with, like we give them a target, their plans are like perfectly fine. They're perfectly fine.
Yeah.
No, sometimes they're not that great. Sometimes they make mistakes, but a lot of times it's like, you know what? That would work. That would work on this target for real. And these are people that are civilians, because let's face it, hitting a target of bad guys, it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science to figure out what you're going to do. And we give them enough basics that they can figure it out. But for me, the leadership laboratory that we got to work in when we were actually in and actually at TradeEt and actually seeing platoons go through, that is such a powerful thing, because, man, when you are in those situations, you feel it. And when you think, oh, I'm good at detaching, and then you go on a run where you're freaking yelling and screaming, and and you say, oh, how was that detachment on the last run? As you were yelling and screaming at everybody and shooting your weapon a bunch and no one took charge of anything. So obvious when you actually experience it, and you learn that lesson so much more thoroughly when you actually experience it. It's freaking awesome to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had messages like on Instagram or LinkedIn where people have gone through our training. It's like, hey, I had this situation at work and I thought about that time where you took the gun away from me and told me to lead. Because when they're not detached and they're just getting after it with their gun, but they're actually in charge, like every now and then I'll take their gun away. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, lead. Yeah. Now you can lead because you don't have the gun. And so, they'll write back like, I remember the time you did this to me or you said this to me. And I say that at the FTXs. I'm like, hey, going through that pain actually solidifies that lesson way more. It's like Bruce Lee says, the pain will leave you when it's done teaching you. It's one of my favorite quotes. And I tell people that too, like in my brief in the morning, I'm like, hey, we're not here to teach you leadership. I mean, we're not here to teach you tactics. We're here to teach you leadership. And in the absence of knowledge, because you don't have any, knowledge doing this, what do you have to lean back on? Your leadership, which is simply you trying to influence another 25 people towards a common goal. So you're going to have to use all those tools that we've, talked about. Mm-hmm. And the groups that do the best are the ones that are able to apply it immediately. Like they make that connection. And the ones that struggle are the ones that can't seem to do that.
What's interesting? I was just thinking about this from a jiu-jitsu perspective. How long have you been training jiu-jitsu for?
Since 2012.
2012.
Lots of off.
So what's interesting is, people, like you take a normal dude.
Yeah.
And you say, hey, what dude that doesn't train? And you think, hey, if you get in a fight, what would you do? And they kind of think, what is it? Hey, I just see red, bro. I'll go off, bro. Like that's kind of what they think. They think that is how they're going to fight. And that's how they would win in a fight. Like, hey, I'll just freaking make it happen. And that's totally ignorant. That's one of the most ignorant things you could say. And if you go against someone that's trained, then you're absolutely going to lose. But there's also a really good chance you'll lose anyways. Imagine this. There's people that are in leadership positions that their mentality is that exact same thing. Hey, if I'm in charge, I'll tell people, I'll handle it. And they could literally learn jiu-jitsu for leadership. We have jiu-jitsu for leadership. It's like an amazing, untapped knowledge that like the Gracies brought jiu-jitsu to the world. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, I can choke people. I can defeat someone that's bigger than me. I can avoid getting hit. Like there's all these amazing things that we literally did not know as humans. We did not know. And if you would have gotten a fight if I would have gotten into a fight in 1990 or 1991, I would do what my instincts are, throw haymakers, whatever it is a human is going to do is what I would do. And then all of a sudden, as soon as I learned, the choke, the arm, like all of a sudden you know what to do. And now you can handle all these situations. And it's the same thing with what we teach. It's like, this isn't some mysterious thing. Like this is an arm lock. It's called cover and move. Here's taking the back. This is keeping things simple. You can actually learn maneuvers for leadership. And that's what hits people when they're going through our programs. You can see it in their face. They're like, I remember when a guy was doing this to me and all I had to do back was diminish, reflect and diminish. I could have taken that angry person and reflected some of those emotions, but diminished them, and then I could reflect it in such a way that they would realize that I'm on their side, and then we'd be able to have a real conversation and move this thing forward. That's one move. There's all these moves you can learn, and man, it's just like this. You know what? It's actually the same look when somebody does jiu-jitsu in whatever moment, because different people get it at a different time. That moment where they go, "Oh, this is amazing!" Like, "Oh, it all makes sense." I think it's sometimes when people realize that, and then you sweep them and you're in the mount and they go, oh, it all's connected. You see that look in their eyes, and I see that look in their eyes. That's what you're talking about. Like the guy that you're talking about that came back at the end of the day like, hey, can I come tomorrow? Because he realized that it's all connected, that leadership is a skill, that he could actually utilize these tools to go out there and lead his team with skills and with techniques and with procedures, moves. Man, it's freaking empowering.
Yeah.
Legit. And that's where you're at right now.
Yeah.
We just went through your whole damn life, bro.
Yep.
That's pretty impressive. We'll have to. I know you had some stuff that you wrote down for me that we didn't cover today that we'll probably cover on the next time. As get a little bit more granular on some of these things that you experienced for sure. But probably a pretty good place to wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Echo probably has some questions at this point.
I'll keep it.
What? Got questions?
I'll keep it simple. Have you ever heard that you look like Oscar De La Hoya?
Every day of my life since I was 16.
I understand
Damn.
completely.
As a matter of fact, in my platoons, they already knew what was coming. And so when we would go out, like, people would be like, hey, is that? And they would be like, yep, it sure is.
Yep, we're security.
Yeah, that's what they would say.
100%.
And just not too long ago, I was in New York, and I was with my wife, and this guy comes up to me. He's like, hey, man, I still think pound for pound, you're the best. And then she's like, are you going to correct him? And I'm like, I'm tired of correcting people. But then it's like more people started coming. I'm like, hey, guys, I'm not Oscar.
It's like the buff version of Oscar De La Hoya.
The jacked version.
Oh, yeah.
The jacked version.
I've gotten that forever.
Yeah, that is an uncanny resemblance. Yeah. Who do you look like, Echo Charles?
Jade.
Too easy, bro. You've been asked that one before. That was too easy. Got that twin brother. Yeah, man, like I said, we'll dig into some more of this stuff in the future. Probably a good place to wrap it today.
Sounds good.
Echo Charles.
Yes, sir.
Sounds like it kind of seems like Carlos has gotten a lot done.
Yes, he has.
I'm thinking maybe we should all do more. What do you think?
We should do
Where do
more.
we start?
Well, you mentioned jiu-jitsu.
What a good place to start.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we want to.
What are you, a purple belt?
Yeah.
Purple
Good.
belt.
2012. It's 21. It's 9 years. When did you get your purple belt?
Just recently.
Yeah, but off and on. That's how.
Yeah, I was on deployment a lot, and then I bounced around a couple schools, and I'm training actually with your buddy Aaron Hernandez.
Oh, right on.
Dude, he's awesome.
Freaking awesome.
He's awesome.
Like he started training that when we were at Fabio Santos. He was like 10 years old, man.
He
a
showed
little
me
kid.
pictures.
I want to see those pictures, bro.
Yeah.
That's
I'll tell
freaking
him.
rad. What? Yeah. He's awesome, man. His dad would just come. A lot of times nowadays you see like the dads all into jiu-jitsu, and that's why the kids are there.
Yeah.
Almost against their will. It didn't seem like Aaron's dad was into it, but he's like, oh, this is what my kid wants to do? Cool. I'm going to sit here every day, for 2 hours on the bench waiting for my kid to get done with this, whatever this weird stuff is that he's doing.
Yeah.
Freaking legit. So what's that? 2012. So you're almost 10 years deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got that
That's
purple
how the-
belt.
Underachieving
It
purple
happens,
belt.
man. It happens.
Yeah. So yeah, even Leif was like that too, right?
Yeah.
Dude,
Like,
Leif
he
was
training-
Leif was a white belt. Bro, I started training those guys in 2005, but actually he had trained before that. Leif had trained at Fabio's
Oh, no kidding.
before 2005.
Yeah.
So Leif was like a white belt for,
Long time.
Yeah, long time, as we used to say in Hawaii. Long time.
Yes, sir.
Long time.
I was perfectly happy at blue belt. And
Yeah.
Aaron was like, bro,
He got to do it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, blue belt is the last chance you have to be under the radar.
Yeah.
Because once you're a purple belt,
People expect it.
You can get tapped. You can literally get tapped by a white belt as a blue belt, and it's not that big of a deal, right?
Right.
You're kind of like, well, I'm just a blue belt. Just a blue belt, it covers a lot of ground. I was a blue belt for a long time too. I was a blue belt because I was a blue belt. I got my blue belt in San Diego, but then I moved to Virginia Beach, and I was training. When I was in San Diego, I was training all the time. And then when I got to Virginia Beach, I did a couple deployments, so I wasn't training as much. But even when I was on deployment, I would train with the boys. But I was still a blue belt. So it was years. I think I was a blue belt for and then when I got back to San Diego, Fabio, I had to re-earn my it was like when I wasn't at Fabio's, I wasn't training.
Yeah.
He's like, whatever. Hey, I don't know where you were. You might have gotten better, but it doesn't count.
We're starting where you left off.
Yeah, we started where I left off with him. So it took me another probably, I think I was a blue belt for 5 years.
Yeah.
Blue belt. And I never buy my wife anything. Hardly ever. The poor woman. But when I got my purple belt, I went to a flower store. I got a purple flower of some kind, or like 5 purple flowers, and brought them up. I was so stoked that I wanted my wife to be kind of stoked too to get that purple belt.
That's good.
But and I was ready for it too. Like, I mean, when I got my purple belt, I was ready for that purple belt. I had somebody who got their black belt the other day. A friend of mine got a black belt the other day. He's like, I'm not ready for it. I was like, no one feels like they're ready for their black belt. No one, almost no one, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you just won Worlds or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're not just like, oh yeah.
I forget who it was. I think it might have been Clark Gracie. I think I could be wrong, so whatever. But it was the kind where he was winning everything as a brown belt, everything. And I think he was like, I don't know if it was the coach or whatever. Someone was kind of like, oh, wait, is he doing that just so he can win a bunch? And someone was like, bro, like he can't compete as a brown belt anymore. It's like someone has to give him his black belt.
Yeah.
Like that's the only exception I could ever think of.
Yeah, well, Dean List won ADCC as a brown belt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, huh?
Yeah, but via submission, by the way. Absolute, by the way.
Dang.
So we're thinking jiu-jitsu's good.
Yes, jiu-jitsu's good. Fitness is good. Carlos in great shape. You know. And always good to see you. So we got some healthy, how should I say, healthy. We want to go in a healthy direction, mentally, physically. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to talk about energy drinks first, because that's, kind of what we do from time to time. So we got Jocko, Discipline Go, energy drink, healthy energy drink. By the way, if you didn't know, Carlos.
Oh, I do. Those things power the FTXs.
I know.
That was like a softball, what do you call it, rhetorical kind of question, right? Because I know you know about the Discipline Go scenarios. So we will drink energy drinks now as long as it's this kind.
Yeah, for sure. Because the other kind is bad. It's a dichotomy. Well, this kind completely bad for you. Legitimately bad for you. And this isn't like, oh, well, Jocko's trying to sell his energy drink. No, I'm telling you, those other energy drinks are factually bad for you. Yeah. We have one that is factually good for you.
Yes, sir.
Factually.
You know that there's a, I don't know the service, but you can do it online. I was going to do it for a video I was going to make a long time ago, before all this, where you can make your own energy drink. Like, if you want, Carlos Extra Thunder energy drink or whatever, and you can kind of pick a flavor, and then like they'll design the thing, or you can design the thing, and then you just get it. But it's all like the similar, like if you want cherry blast or whatever, I don't know what you'd call it, but if you get like a cherry flavored one, it's like the same cherry flavored as like, Jocko cherry blast. You know what I'm saying?
I would do lemon lime los.
You know what's interesting is you might think to yourself, and this is good because you did the investment banking thing for a while. And did you guys take any companies public?
So actually, during my internship, I worked on an IPO. Yeah, it's
interesting because we work with a bunch of public companies, obviously, but you might think to yourself, like, hey, well, why doesn't everyone just make a energy drink that's good for you? You think that, right? Like, hey, well, that seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
And here's the deal: it's more expensive. It's more expensive, and it's going to cut into your profit. And as soon as you get into a point in a company where you're like, oh, we want to do the right thing and make the best product, and we are not going to make as much money. There's like armies of people that tear you apart and say, no, just freaking make more money. It's the same. Yeah. It's the same thing with with our hard goods, with our clothing. Yeah. As soon as you get to a point where you can make jeans, we're making jeans. As soon as someone goes, hey, we could shave 48 cents off the price per pair of those jeans. Oh, yeah. There's an army of people that say, do it. They say, sell your soul. That's what they say. And it works.
Of course. It works. Makes sense. Think about it, too, especially the more you sell, right? Where, okay, I'm going to do this. Oh, we're going to shave 48 cents. When you're selling like 10 pair or 10 whatever, it's like 40 cents. It's like what, $4? Like, bro, I'd rather keep my integrity. Yep. But once the numbers start going way up there, and 48 cents means like another, like, I don't know, $500,000 for you or whatever, you're like, oh, I think that 48 cents,
so it's a literal selling of the soul.
Literal
selling of the soul, man. Because like this is pasteurized, right? Which means we don't have to put chemicals in it. Which, by the way, this is chemicals that everybody uses. They all throw them in there. Hey, that's not that bad.
Right.
It's not that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, sell your soul.
We'll say industry standard.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
so
the industry standards.
yeah,
You
yeah.
can kind of shrug your shoulders and be like, well,
Yeah.
that's the way everyone's doing it.
Well, there's certain like toxins, right? Where like the FDA is like, well, you just keep them below this level, and technically it's like it's legal or whatever. It's like considered not harmful or whatever. What if you pound like 3 of those every day? Right, you're gonna have
It's crazy.
Big trouble. Big trouble. Nonetheless, not with these. Obviously, it's good. So yeah, get on some of that. That'll help you. That'll help us.
Move you in the right direction.
Yes, sir. Staying fit and mentally, because the cognitive stuff in there as well. Also, keep your joints in the game as well. If you want to work out as you get older, your joints
Do you
have
lift
to
today?
maintain. No, not
Do you
yet.
lift today?
I did.
Yeah.
What time you lift? What time do you usually work out?
It's not 4:30. So today I got up at 6.
What'd you do? Just like but like roughly, what'd you do?
Yeah, what
Did
was-
you do
what's the-
pull-ups?
what's the
Did you do?
program?
What'd you do?
Today's leg day.
Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, it just happened to be. This is a Sunday.
Yeah.
But here's what's cool. I got done. I was my son opened the door to my garage, and I could feel his presence there. And normally he's wanting to jack steel himself. And I racked the weight, squats, racked the weight, turned around, and he goes, "How many more you got?" And I go, "I'm done," because I was literally done. And he goes, "Waves are good at the pier." And I go, "Let's hit it."
Is it cold right now? Kind of cold.
It's California. It's California, meaning it's not going to freeze, but it's
Right.
not going to be warm either.
Are we using a wetsuit right now?
I used a wetsuit
There
today.
you go. Boom.
Weakness.
I think-
Weakness?
No. Efficiency. Look, do you want to enjoy surfing? You don't want to enjoy surfing.
You know what the weird thing is? Frankly, if you go surfing without a wetsuit, it's only cold for the first, most days. I mean, if
Yeah.
it's freezing, but most days it's only cold for 3 minutes. And then it's just normal and you feel fine. Those 3 minutes though, that's what has people squeezing into that damn wetsuit.
Yeah, and also when you're in the cold water, you'll handle, and maybe for like an hour, I mean, it depends who you are, obviously, but after like an hour, it's almost like the coldness, like you get hit with that initial coldness, and your body's like, it's not that cold actually, so we're cool. Plus, you're generating heat from all this stuff, but then the coldness kind of on a strategic level starts to just seep in, and it kind of hits you. You're like, bro, I'm kind of this. It's kind of
Here's a big factor. Do you surf, Carlos?
No, I don't.
Here's a big factor. If you're going to be catching a lot of waves and there's good waves coming in, you're going to be fine. But if it's one of those days where you're going to be waiting and there's a little brisk breeze at your back, you're going to get chilly woo.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to get chilly
There's
woo.
two factors with that. Because one, you're not having fun. You can endure. Like, you actually don't even notice a lot of stuff when you're having, like, fun. You don't notice how tired you're getting.
Yeah.
You don't notice a lot of stuff. Cold's probably one of those when you're, hitting. And then you're moving way less.
Yeah.
And then you're just sitting there just being cold.
Just sit there being cold, man.
man.
Now, let's face it, that's kind of legit. When I see someone skinning it, I was like props. You get into. I'm giving you props. If you're skinning it, you're getting props.
Oh, I understand,
Maybe if it's the dead of summer, but any other time, if it's not August, and you're skinning it, I give you a little bit of, and it's sometimes myself too.
Yeah.
I'll be like, you know what, we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
A little skin.
It's
It's funny too, because when you go through buds, did you have wetsuits that had like legs connected to them when you went through buds?
No, I don't think so. We just had shorties.
Oh no, I had like beaver tail.
Oh, so that's what we had at First Recon Battalion. With
Okay.
beaver tails. So
Yeah.
when I got the buds, I'm like, dang, they give these students better wetsuits, and we got it.
What's beaver tail?
It's like the back of the wetsuit has like a long tail on it, and it comes up underneath your crotch and like snaps into position in front of you.
Oh, okay.
It does nothing to hold in any water at all. It's the dumbest invention ever. Whoever invented the beaver tail is an idiot. You would never come up with that plan, right?
Yeah.
So, but now they have where the shirt of the wetsuit is connected to the trunks, which is a whole different ballgame. This is a whole different ballgame. This is a totally different situation. And they get that in buds, by the way. You got that in buds.
I don't think I've ever worn a wetsuit ever. I can't remember one single time. Interesting.
That's the way it is in Hawaii. Right? It's a little different out here.
Yep.
Shredding.
Anyway, back
Yep.
to our joints.
What are we talking about here?
We don't want to have joint problems. That's another thing. Cold water is good for your
Yeah,
joints.
it is.
By the way.
That's why you got to get in that bath.
Yeah.
In the ice bath.
But if you're not going to jump in the ice bath as often as maybe you could, you just keep the what's called Joint Warfare Super Krill Oil supplement. Just take the supplement. So easy way, so you don't got to freeze yourself.
Vitamin
from
D.
time to time.
Take vitamin D, 100%. Take that every day.
Yep, I agree.
Cold War. Keep the immunity strong.
Yep.
You can get all this stuff from JockoFuel.com. Get some Mulk too.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, man. Let's face it, that's a tough one. It's a tough one to not. Bro, did you see that? I posted some steaks I had the other day.
Yeah, I saw that.
That looked amazing.
Yeah. People send me steaks. Which is like the only, like, yeah, people send me steaks. Those were from, you know Jack Arnold?
Jack.
Yeah. He's a barbecue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
He sent those.
Is that the ones that he always cooks
I think
with?
it's maybe. I don't know. They're cow, K-O-W,
Yeah,
but
cow.
damn, they were good. They were good.
Yeah, they look
so good. Even when I got done eating those, even when I got done eating a freaking full-on tomahawk steak, I was like, cool. Guess what I wanted? A little bit of sweetness.
Yeah.
A little bit of goodness.
Yeah.
A little bit, what's that other word? It's like savory. Savory is like steak, right?
Yeah, like salty or whatever.
Right. And then sweet. What's Mulk? It's got both.
Well, if you think about it, the real good desserts, the flavors have like little bit of like savor, like a little bit of savor, little bit.
Yeah.
And then if you think about it, like the good like savory has a little bit of sweet too. When you think about it,
So we're talking about Mulk basically. It's hot Mulk season, by the way. It's like there's having a hot Mulk in the morning. Oh man, I'm not talking early morning like pre-workout. I'm talking 9 o'clock in the morning. Starting to feel a little bit of hunger. It's a little bit cool outside. Hot Mulk coming at you live.
Yeah, that's.
Hey, do I throw whipped cream on top of that? I do. That's still paleo.
Well, yeah, actually, a lot of whipped cream. Well, I don't know about a lot, but the one that my wife buys, it's actually not that bad for you.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty solid. I was surprised by that.
Keeping it real with that keto.
Very happy with that.
Check. Get yourself some Mulk too.
That's clean protein, though, by the way. We don't really mention that because, like, sometimes, remember back in the day or whenever you didn't take Mulk, you take protein shake, you got the, let's face it, like, you get some secondary effects, from that.
Not the kind of effects you want.
Negative. No, sir. No, sir. But no, it's not like that anymore. But yeah, there's that. And then also Jocko White tea, the old school. If you like tea, hot tea now, obviously.
Yep. And if you like deadlifting, by the way.
Yes, sir.
You're going to want that Jocko White
That's
tea.
the one. But yeah, get it all at JockoFuel.com. Also, the energy drinks you already said, right?
Yep,
Vitamin
at
Shop
Wawa.
and Wawa.
By the way, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this or not yet, but we got some ready to drink Mulk coming.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's nice.
let's just say I'm not saying that the creators the creators deserve a Nobel Prize. I'm not saying that it's definite, but they should be in the contention. They should be mentioned. There should be a mention.
Okay.
When you try these things, yeah. So you're going to be able to, in the future, go into a Wawa, boom, go right straight and just get Mulk on tap, bro. Like,
And actually, that makes sense when you think about it, because it's not like, when you think about, if you spend any time thinking about it, maybe I do, maybe I don't, I don't know. But either way, it's like you can't just, because Mulk is the powder, right?
Yeah.
And then you have your mix. Like, we'll put in the banana, we'll put in the whatever, right? And it's like there's variations of mixes and variations of results. And it makes sense. So it's like, hey, if you're going to drink the ready-to-drink one, you got to commit to a very specific mix across the board per flavor. You see what I'm saying? So now you got to rely on whoever, expert. I know they're an expert, I'll tell you that.
You ever had something come into your life that it just came out of nowhere? Like you couldn't have predicted it?
Yeah.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Salted caramel. I didn't even know what this was not in my world. Never in my world, this idea. Salted caramel. What is this? Like, what is this? So we have a salted caramel version. Good,
I'm actually familiar with the salted caramel, so that one, to me, that makes sense. That sounds delicious.
All right. So there we go.
There you go.
JockoFuel.com.
Also,
get it.
Also, Origin USA. This is American-made stuff. Not just any stuff. It's like for real American-made, like products, jeans, boots, some wallets on there. The accessories. I've been going kind of deep on the accessories recently on that website. Pretty impressive.
Just getting in there.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, everything from the material all the way to the product, all made in America. Quality stuff, too. If you care about the people and the process.
If you care about humanity,
Yes, sir.
how's that?
Yes, sir.
If you care about humanity, go to originusa.com.
Yep.
Because you know what you were talking about? You know what you were talking about earlier, Carlos? Seeing people, these people are hard workers, and the first time you worked with an echelon front client, you're like, man, these people are working hard. They want to do a good job. And that's awesome. That's so awesome that we get to experience all these people across the country. But then there's industries and there's corporations that say, you know what? To hell with those people. To hell with those hardworking people. We're going to offshore this stuff. We're going to put it into slave labor camps. We're going to give money to communists. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're gonna have slave people build this stuff, and we're gonna give money to communist regimes. That's what we'll do. How's that sound?
And that kind of goes along with that 48 cents like
Yo,
profit
it's
you're trying to get.
that's
right?
what drives it.
Yeah.
Don't let that happen. Go to Origin USA. Get your boots. Get your jeans.
Your gi.
Get your
that
gi
cheap
for
shit.
sure.
You have Origin gi yet?
You don't.
Brutal. Well, actually, in a way,
It's 100% my fault.
Yeah,
It's 100% my fault.
I feel like it's 100% your fault too. But
I actually feel bad too because, like, what I was just talking about, something coming into your life. When you put on an Origin gi, for real. When you put on an Origin gi, it is for real. You got some other thing coming into your life that you did not expect was a thing.
Yeah,
I will take you as soon as we get done recording. I'll take you. You can touch one of mine. They're too big for you. But you'll be
I was
like,
gonna say, I'm gonna get you one. We'll get you sorted. No.
We can do that
You
too.
can touch
No,
mine.
yeah.
You can do that too.
touch,
You can touch one of my Origin geese, and you'll be like, "What is this? What sort of unicorn fur is this that's been used to create this thing?" Because it's a different level, man.
Yeah.
It's a different level.
Yeah,
So we got
that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say that's kind of good news in a way for me. So like, I can kind of like, how someone's about to do something really like, whether it be fun or cool or it's gonna be real beneficial, and then you get to like experience it with them.
Oh, yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you get to share that experience. You get to see that
so
smile.
it's kind of good news. Can't wait for you.
Yeah. Got Origin rash guards. Those are awesome.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I do use those.
Yep.
Oh,
Made
yeah.
in America.
Yeah,
Just imagine that. Made in America.
it's true.
Beautiful thing. Go.
Also, Jocko's store is called Jocko Store. That's where you can get your Discipline Equals Freedom shirts. The jiu-jitsu shirt that I
Jiu-jitsu
noticed
shirt.
that you are representing hardcore, by the way.
Representing hardcore.
You can get
that
that on
freaking
Jocko's
thing looks
store.
legit.
Oh yeah.
So there's a kind of a jiu-jitsu section.
Yes.
How many shirts are in the jiu-jitsu section?
Right now, just that one. And
Limited section, but a
Limited,
section
yeah.
nonetheless. Does it have its own breakout area? Yeah.
When Dean's shirt comes out, it will.
And
but
his
no.
is going to say foot, right?
Foot, just like yours is good. It says foot. Actually, that's his. Technically, that's his design.
Right. I just
That was
saw a
based on
sticker.
your
Someone
design.
put a sticker on the gym out here, and it's got like an old Nam picture of a dude with like a steel pot helmet on in Nam, American, but it's Dean Lister's face, and it says "Foot Soldier." See, we might have to have a Dean Lister section.
You can go deep
on this whole
with
thing.
the feet and Dean and that whole thing. It's true.
So there you go.
But yeah, good spot to get this stuff. Jocko Store, where like I said, Discipline Equals Freedom, jiu-jitsu stuff, good. That's a good one. You watched the Army Navy game.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
Good goes deep. We'll say that.
We did appreciate that, and it kind of worked for Navy. We're this
Yes, apparently.
in the assessment fully.
Yes, sir.
Seemed like it worked
The
out good.
results speak for themselves. But yeah. Also, we have the Shirt Locker, which is a new shirt every month. They're separate from the regular store, but it's a new shirt. They're a little bit more creative, I would say. Some good feedback on that one. We got things squared away too, by the way.
We got one
on that
coming
whole
out
thing.
too, right? There should be a new one coming out pretty soon.
Yeah. So if I'm not sure what, so right now, if you join, you'll get that shirt for that month.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was like, okay, I joined, then the next month your shirt kind of comes, but it's all squared and right away, all that kind of stuff. It's good, squared. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we got December still going, and then January there's another one. That's how it works. Dude. Good
That's
stuff.
what monthly shirt means.
Yes,
Subscribe
sir.
to that. If you also subscribe to this podcast, we got this podcast. We got Jocko Unraveling. We got the Grounded podcast. We got the Warrior Kid podcast. We also have Jocko Underground. JockoUnderground.com. We're on there answering questions,
life advice.
alternative topics that apply to everything.
Everything.
If you know the way broadly you see it in all things. It also protects us because listen, we don't know what's going to happen in the world, but we do know that sometimes people want to control what you say. They want to control what we say. We haven't run into any major issues yet. A couple. We brushed up against a couple.
Yes.
We'd have a couple scenarios unfold. And just in case, just to protect us from that, we got to have a contingency plan. That's jockounderground.com. Go there if you want to support. Costs $8.18 a month. And we give you this extra podcast. But look, if you can't afford that, it's okay. Email assistance at jockounderground.com. We just got to have somewhere as an alternative place to be in case. So that's where we're at. YouTube channel.
Yep, we have a YouTube channel. You want to see Oscar De La Hoya, Carlos Mendez, how he's handsome. You're more jacked though.
Thank you.
So that would be the telltale sign, I think. If someone runs into you in the street, you're gonna be like, dang, that's Oscar De La Hoya.
He's like, yeah, I've been lifting.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. But yes, if you want to see what he looks like, YouTube channel, video version of this podcast, and excerpts.
Yeah.
Which is important.
Yeah. Also, check out Origins YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It's good to know what's happening. For instance, COVID outbreak in Maine. Do you know about that?
I did not know.
Yeah.
That.
See, so if you would know about that COVID outbreak in Maine. We had like 40 people from the factory.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I watched that one.
But which is a bummer.
Yeah.
We got people coming back in now, but Black Friday. Do you know what that is?
Yes, sir.
It's after Thanksgiving. People go shopping.
I heard.
Yeah. And we sold a bunch of stuff, which is awesome. And then everyone got sick with COVID, or a bunch of people got sick with COVID. So now we're trying to play catch up.
Yep.
And Pete making moves, trying to make it happen.
Yeah,
Amanda.
That's a big learning channel too when you think about it, because you can see of course how the inner workings of an American business is, but like how and they've done it many times before, where it's like an issue will come up and you can see like how they'll solve the issue. And it's unique to that specific thing. So it's like, oh, okay, you can it's like a demonstration.
Yep.
It's pretty interesting.
Psychological warfare.
Yep.
If you got any moments of weakness, you can overcome them. Press play on your phone. Hit play. Got an MP3 out there.
Yep.
How many tracks? Do you remember?
I think it's 7 or 9. I forget.
9 tracks, I'm thinking.
Yep. So from nine, give or take, moments or types of moments of weakness. You got coverage for that.
Check. Also, Dakota Meyer has a company called Flipside Canvas, flipsidecanvas.com. Go there, get cool stuff to hang on your wall. If you don't have a elk head to hang on your wall,
yeah, I don't have an elk.
Then you can get one of these things as an alternate thing to hang on your wall.
Yeah, legit.
Books. We got some books. Final Spin that just came out. Getting freaking awesome reviews, which is crazy. Yeah. It's crazy to think of something weird and then write it, and then people give you cool reviews.
Right.
Very cool. It's not what you expect. I have to say that. Yeah. That's a lot of people say, I wasn't expecting this. In fact, some people go, I wasn't expecting the story to go this way. Again, we're not we're less predictable possibly than some people might think. Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual. The Code, the Evaluations, the Protocol, Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. Way the Warrior Kid 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is the book to get for all the kids that you know. And by the way, sometimes people are like, well, is it appropriate for girls? Yes. Girls, boys, kids. Get these freaking books for the kids. This is the Christmas season. There's no better gift you can get a kid than these books. That's a bold statement. Carlos, do you think that's a bold statement?
No better gift.
No better gift.
I would have to agree. I grew up with books, loved books.
I don't think
kids don't read enough these days.
I don't think there's a better gift you can give a kid than the Way the Warrior Kid books. And I got many, many, many kids and parents that will back that up. That aren't me. Mikey and the Dragons, you can also get that for the little kids. Little warning, when you read that to your kids, you might start crying. It's happened before, Echo Charles.
No, that was Way the Warrior Kid 1.
Oh, really?
When Uncle Jake... Oh, no. Okay, when I was making the video, yeah, a little bit.
For Mikey and the Dragons.
Yeah.
Get a little teared up over there.
Well, that was you going... Way the Warrior Kid when Uncle Jake... Spoiler alert, by the way. When Uncle Jake had to went home.
Yeah.
Bro, was kind of sad.
Dude, I was laughing when I read that one story and you were crying like really hard. on the podcast.
I wasn't crying. That's the thing. I
he was
wasn't
crying
No,
so
no,
hard,
no, no,
and
no.
he edited it down. People go, "Do you edit the podcast?" And I'm like, "No, we never edited it." He edited it down. I didn't realize it until later because he was crying
Bruh,
and couldn't put a sentence together.
not true. It's
And
not
then
true. How about
I started laughing so hard, and I'm like, "Bro, you can't break down like this, dude." He's talking about a Hawaii 5-0, and he's breaking down.
It was
crying.
a sad scene, is what I was saying,
All
or a
right.
happy scene. Sorry.
So, warning, Mikey and the Dragons might catch you off guard if you're feeling emotionally vulnerable.
Yeah.
Then it might catch you a little bit. So just,
Sure.
stay strong.
Stay
You know,
strong.
stay focused.
Yes,
Don't
sir.
let yourself break down.
Mm-hmm.
About Face by Hackworth. Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership. That actually helped your marriage. That attitude. Taking
true,
ownership of
That's
things.
true. That's
I
a
went
big
back
deal.
and read the book again, but in a different way. Because the first time I read it, I was like, okay, I want to be a better leader in combat. So that's kind of like the vision I had when I was reading it. And then the second time, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to read it from my life, my personal life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
From a
switch.
different lens.
It's such a useful switch where because that's a big thing, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, these big bad Navy SEALs, they're gonna tell me how to run my daycare center. Like, bruh, no way. Like in real life, no way. But it's
In
like
real
just
life,
like
yes way.
yes, exactly right. Where it's like the Navy SEAL, like all the combat stuff. That's just the example, essentially. It's just an example of these principles, like being used in these like situations or whatever. But and since they are useful in everything, if you look at it in the sense of where they're talking to me for my specific situation and using the battlefield as a metaphor for sure, but they're talking to me for my specific situation. It's like, oh shoot, everything checks out.
Yep. And as you read things from different perspectives, like, yeah, you can read it from a professional perspective like you did the first time, Carlos. Yeah. Then you read it from a personal perspective the next time. But then guess what happens? You get promoted. Read it again. You see it from another perspective again. Mm-hmm. Then you have a problem where you get moved to a new team and the dynamics are different. Read it again. You will have a different perspective and you will pick up more things from those books. Also, we have a leadership consultancy we were just talking about, Echelon Front, echelonfront.com. If you want to do any of the things that we talk about on this podcast, if you want to learn the information, go to echelonfront.com. It's what we do. We do the FTX. That's one part of it. We also do leadership training that's not experiential. So you're going to sit down, learn with us, but we'll still make it dynamic through role playing and other methodologies that we have. So if you want to check some of that out, go to echelonfront.com. You having fun there, Carlos?
Oh, yeah. It's awesome. I mean, the people that you meet are just amazing as well. Because, I mean, people that call for extreme ownership are not lazy people. They're people who just want to take it to the next level. So I honestly haven't met a client yet that I just didn't really like. And it's awesome because you keep in touch with them. Like, they hit you up every now and then, and they kind of become your friends.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I get texts all the time. I get texts from that are like, hey, we just did this. It's awesome. I'll also get texts like, hey, can I talk to you? And they'll have some situation going on. It's like, all right, what do you got? What do you got? Let's work through this. Hey, we also have an online training academy. And there's a bunch of reasons why we started that. The biggest reason why we started it is because, like I was saying earlier about jiu-jitsu and actually having a skill and getting good at this thing called leadership. Well, just like jiu-jitsu, you can't go to one class and be like, oh, okay, cool, I'm good now, I know it. No, it takes repetition. It takes understanding the various angles. It takes expanded knowledge. It takes confronting different scenarios multiple times so you understand how to understand them. You learn to understand how to understand them. Imagine that. You're looking at a situation, you don't know what to do. You can actually understand how to understand that. So this doesn't happen overnight. That's why we made extremeownership.com and the online training academy. We're on there all the time. There's courses that you can take. You can go live sessions. I'm on there 2 or 3 times a week answering questions face to face, like on a Zoom call. It's a Zoom call. You want to ask me a question? Come on there. extremeownership.com if you want to check that out. If you want to help service members, active and retired, you want to help their families, you want to help Gold Star families, check out Mark Lee's mom, Mama Lee. She's got a charity organization, does a ton of incredible stuff for our veterans. If you want to donate or you want to get involved, go to americasmightywarriors.org. Actually, I just heard Joe Rogan talking about hyperbaric chambers. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the big things that Mama Lee does is she takes service members and gets them hyperbaric chamber treatments for like 30 straight days. So good for you. So helpful. So check that out if you want. And if you want more of my just continued droning talking, or you need more of Echo's
Bro, I gotta be like
just unknown randomness. Yeah, you can find us on the interwebs, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm at Echo Charles, and I am at Jocko Willink. Echo's at Echo Charles. Carlos is now on the gram.
I am.
Carlos _ Mendez _ 246.
That's correct.
That was your entry into the social media world, right?
Yeah, I didn't have one in the teams, and when I came on to Echelon Front, JP told me to open one up. So,
recommended.
it's a whole new world out there. I could watch so many jiu-jitsu videos.
That is true.
Yeah.
It's funny how they know what you like. It's like, how am I already getting this?
Yeah. The whole algorithm thing, like the algorithm thing, I wrote the other day, fight the algorithm. But the problem is when the jiu-jitsu videos start rolling, it's hard to fight that algorithm.
yeah.
Like, wait a second, let me watch that again.
Bro, kind of embrace the algorithm in
No,
a way. In
no,
a way.
Take it easy.
Whoa.
And LinkedIn, you're on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Is that, do you like participate in LinkedIn? Because you mentioned it a few times today.
So I had it when I was getting ready to transition out of the Navy, because that's how I started reaching out to people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have one of those too.
Yeah. I have LinkedIn too.
Yeah, me too.
So we're on there. Echo, you got any final questions?
That's it. Oh, actually, so do you think, and I think this may seem like an obvious answer, but more so, okay, so when you were growing up, you know, you had so many chores, like it was like hard, right? Like, so you got used to hard work really quickly and thoroughly, essentially. Could you feel that, like, as, you know, you go through, like, you know, hard things in combat, buds, like all these hard things or whatever, and because you said something kind of interesting where you're like, okay, on the third time after you got rolled or whatever, the third time you passed with no issues, you said.
Yeah.
A lot of people, like, buds is like real hard for them. Did you feel that your work ethic that was established, like, was the factor that made it like a non-issue? Like, could you feel that at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what's crazy is I thought about my stepdad a lot during Hell Week, because I thought about how hard he worked. I mean, the man worked nonstop, 7 days a week, 2 jobs. And when I was going through Hell Week, I thought about him. I was like, you know what? If he can do that, I can do this.
Right.
This is how I'm going to provide for myself and my family. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you're saying that. Also, it kind of makes you reflect, like, you reflect on, like, someone like your childhood, then I think, man, I should give my kids more chores.
You know what's so weird about buds is you just never know who's going to make it through. You really don't. And there's some silver spoon people that go through there and crush it. Yeah. And there's some silver spoon people that wash out day 2. And there's some freaking kids that grew up wherever in a shitty situation working their ass off and they quit.
Yeah.
And there's some kids like that are awesome. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's very bizarre. It's very hard to predict. There is some, if the guy, like they say, if someone wrestled, it's a really good thing because you have to work really hard in wrestling. Right. That's like an indicator, but it's by no means, he wrestled, he's going to make it. Not at all. Yeah. Not at all. Not even close.
Yeah, it's one of the many factors.
One of the many factors. It might be a little nudge in the direction of, but it's no guarantee.
It's crazy. That's it. No, good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man.
Any closing thoughts, Carlos?
No, not really. Just super grateful to be here. Grateful to be part of the EF team. It's awesome being around team guys again.
Always good, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, man. Thanks for coming out today. Obviously, thanks for your service in the teams, and thanks for what you're doing right now to continue to share the lessons that we learned to help people, which is what we're doing. Just doing our best to help people. You have a great way of imparting the messages. Obviously, it's great that you can open up the tactics and the strategies and the principles to a whole new audience because you're a fluent Spanish speaker, which is awesome. It's been awesome I love watching those videos. I'm like, because I can understand a little bit of Spanish, and because I took 3 semesters of it when I was at University of San Diego, and so I can understand it. I kind of get the vibe, but man, it's freaking cool to watch. So Yeah, man, it's great. I appreciate it, and thanks for holding down the tradition of the teams, and thanks to all the other frogmen out there still in the teams, still keeping the machine rolling on and upholding the standard set by our forefathers. And thanks to all the military personnel out there in every service for protecting freedom around the world, and to our police, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, dispatchers, correctional officers, Border Patrol, Secret Service, all other first responders, including your wife, Carlos. Thanks for protecting us here at home. And everybody else out there, the machine will roll on. The world's going to carry on without us. That's the reality. It would be arrogant to think otherwise. But at the same time, we can make a difference. You can help someone. You can teach someone. You can inspire someone. You can make your part of the world a little bit better. And you do that by going out there every day and getting after it. And until next time, this is Carlos and Echo and Jocko. Out.